What's up guys, this is your favorite fanfic YouTuber, the Fanfic Majesty, and welcome to another amazing video. You can follow me on Patreon for exclusive stories. 7th Street Chapter 91. Pierrot's defense. A gust of wind blew, and the leaves swirled and slowly fell. As soon as the leaves fell back to the ground, Pierrot came in with two people. So they were hiding in nearby cars. On the first move, Pietro gleefully dropped them on the conference room floor. Newspapers were stuffed into his mouth, his limbs were tightly bound by his own restraints, and the originally high-quality clothes were now an insurmountable rope. Two thick white men twisted their bodies in ugly postures, unable to bring them from the top speed. After recovering from the dizziness, they could not vomit out the acidic water in their stomachs. They gasped and rolled their eyes, and it took a long time to resume breathing. "Has anyone seen you move?" Shane asked casually, looking at the two of them. "There's no one around," Pietro shrugged, sure of his own importance. "So no one knows they're here to see me," Shane muttered. His tone was a little wrong, and both of them looked at each other in disbelief and jumped up immediately. But Pietro pressed himself on the two of them in time. Although he was not known for his strength, he was a mutant beyond ordinary people after all. His arms were quite powerful, and he pinched the two of them tightly like two helpless chickens. Neck, leaving them without the slightest strength to resist. At this time, he ignored the wisecrack. "As long as the cars don't open their mouths, I guarantee that no one from the 520 will know where they have gone." "Yes, I'm sure." Shane smiled strangely and leaned over to look at the two of them. "This is close to Bear Mountain State Park. I remember there is a small lake not far from here. Maybe their superiors will think that they were kidnapped by the water monster in the lake, don't you think so?" "It's not good, isn't it?" Pietro replied, rubbing the back of his head hastily, because he finally realized something was wrong. Eric Remarque said that the death of one person is a tragedy, but the death of 1 million people is just a statistic. The number of missing people in this country every day has reached 2,300, and last year it exceeded 90,000, so 2 more people don't seem to matter. They may just push the number to 1 million. You see, this sentence is meant for them, so what are we waiting for? The two people were screaming wildly, speechless, and writhing on the ground. Their faces were red from holding back tears and snot running down their faces. Pietro was also shocked. He had not expected to encounter such a situation, and was stunned for a moment. Then, he heard Shane's order. "You mean slap them?" Pietro grabbed the two men's hands and asked Shane for advice. When he got the answer, he breathed a sigh of relief. Although a slap in the face is uncomfortable, it is nothing compared to rectifying these two scoundrels. Now, even these two men were relaxed and no longer worried about enduring pain. As long as they didn't lose their lives, anything was fine. But the way they clenched their jaws nervously showed that they must have something to say. Pietro warned Shane, but Shane had his own opinion. "Keep calm, Pietro." Shane smiled and leaned over to observe them. Ancient jurists believed that any answer that was not obtained under torture was unreliable. "I've always agreed with this." "Okay." Shane's words were meaningful. Pietro was speechless for a moment and raised his hand. In the horrified eyes of the two people, two clear voices sounded. "No, that's not right." Shane was not satisfied with this and gestured with his posture. "Slapping is like a general directing a war. It is an art that requires in-depth study. In the Renaissance, a skilled artist could majestically enter the flower halls of cardinals and dukes with his own skills. Similarly, if you master, with the secret of slapping, you can make a grown man instantly return to the time when he was a baby swallowing a pacifier. He will stop thinking and confess everything to you without any reservations. Sounds like the power of the gujang." Pietro shrugged and slapped them. With just 2 slaps, his whole body became hot, as if he was engaged in a general battle. "Well said, it seems you have mastered the basic principles, but you still lack practice." Shane praised, making a "please" gesture, and Pietro lowered his head and looked at his captive. "Now when I look at them again, the faces of these two people seem to be rounder." "Oh, I don't want to do this either, but who asked him to be the leader?" Pietro said this apologetically and raised his hand again. This time, both of them burst into tears and howled loudly. Although Pietro's hands did not exert much force, their conversation cheered up both of them. Unfortunately, the suffering was not over yet. They still had to fight for their own. Behavior is punishable. "No, it's impossible." Shane shook his head back and forth. He was determined to completely destroy the will of these two people, and in the process, give the good old Pietro an unforgettable social practice lesson. "Wave your arms, look convincing, and act boldly and decisively." He was talking loudly and criticizing Pietro, his head lowering lower and lower. Just a rebuke is enough to make 60% of people have uneasy consciences, but please think about it. The people here are all pampered and civilized people, and these people are barbarians who are ready to conspire to take away our last property. Deal with barbarians, you can only talk to them in a way they can understand. "Barbarians," Pietro muttered to himself, looking at the two men held by his men. Although their clothes were simple, they had always been in suits and leather shoes before, but now they suddenly changed their appearance, and his thoughts suddenly became confused. Shane noticed that Pietro's eyes became lowered, and it seemed that the young man still needed some motivation. So, he opened the minibar in the conference room, took out the champagne used to celebrate the successful signing, took out 2 glasses, handed one to Pietro, and drank it slowly with him. Kneeling and crying among them were 2 boys who had been assigned by their superiors to incite a union uprising. They didn't realize what trouble they were getting into, nor did they realize that these seemingly kind and bullying mutants could be so terrifying. Admiring their crooked faces, Shane's voice echoed lazily in the conference room. In ancient times, barbarians referred to foreigners who wore animal skins, wielded wooden sticks, and engaged in robbery and unproductive labor. In the Middle Ages, the word was reinterpreted, even though they were well-dressed, possessed of superb skills and gentle character. Those who did not believe in Christ were still classified as savages. And in our time, this name suddenly disappeared from our world. Those who still wore animal skins were called aborigines, while the latter were called for foreigners or minorities. No matter what they are called, as long as they are in this country, at least on the surface they will be respected. But there is only one exception. There is only one exception. They are a branch of mankind. They are as old as mankind. They may not have been specially assigned a place on Noah's Ark, but the Creator has certainly given these people more favors. They're us, the mutants. Then, Shane's eyes turned to Pietro, with a fiery light shining in his eyes. Pietro's heart suddenly lifted, and he felt a little dry. 0. Shane's voice continued, and his aura became more and more convincing. His voice was like a drum, beating on Pietro's heart and pushing his blood. We are the true darlings of the Creator, and we are the most undisputed successors on this land. But such great mutants have to succumb to the will of ordinary people like herbivores. It's unbelievable, but compared with us, I call these guys who dress luxuriously and are used to trampling on the interests of others as barbarians. To deal with barbarians, you must use their language. In their world, a slap in the face makes everyone understand hard currency. Say what you will, Piero, carry out your mission. Shane called loudly, and his will imprinted into the young man's heart along with his voice. The silver-haired young man thought of the days of persecution in Europe. Those insults, hostility and rejection flashed before his eyes one by one, like a hot fire, burning his heart and igniting a raging fire in his heart. Soon, Piero gritted his teeth and raised his palms. Palm branches word. After returning to the office, Pietro still maintained a thoughtful expression, which was undoubtedly incredible to those who knew him well. We have been in contact for many days, and now everyone knows that this is a heartless and enthusiastic boy, but on his face, the former ease has disappeared, replaced by some indescribable calmness and composure. Oh my God, what did you do to Pietro? Aurora was shocked. She and Wanda had always had a good relationship, but of course, she was also worried when she saw the changes in her brother. I think he was scared. Shane smiled. When Aurora heard this, he immediately thought of his recent rant. This man seemed to like to shock others violently, and in a way that caught people off guard. She slapped Shane angrily and protected Wanda, who was worried, behind her. It was late at night, and Shane was still in his front room, when suddenly the door opened from the outside and Pietro walked in. Why did you stop me? His eyes were dark and he looked like he hadn't rested well. No, Shane didn't look up and continued busy with his business. I thought you just said a lot of things just to see me beat someone up. Pietro was not a fool. He roughly guessed it, but what happened next was beyond his expectation. It was the final obstacle. Keeping his hands from falling on other people's faces, for a moment, he seemed to have stepped on a psychological line of defense, but when he looked back, it seemed as if everything was still in the past. Raising your hands and putting them down is courage. Raising your hands and not putting them down is also courage. Killing someone is like a slap in the face, it is just a momentary act. Humans are not friendly, and I want you to grow up for the sake of your fellow humans and sisters, but it is not time to cross the line yet. I just want you to understand the true face of this world, in the dim light. Shane opened another page. Pietro seemed to understand something, but Shane did not continue to explain, waved the young man to leave, and left the room himself. But what exactly do you mean? Don't you want me to be your subordinate? If Shane had said it directly, the hero Pietro might have refused, but after so long, he was once again frustrated by being ignored. Do you agree? Shane asked slowly. No one would, Pietro replied hesitantly. Okay, let me see. Shane finally raised his head, opened the mapbook, and read the name. Ads by Bid Gear Chapter 92 Big Food. The beautiful country's Eastern Power Grid Company has a history of more than 100 years of construction and development. Initially, private and public power companies formed an isolated network based on their respective loads and power distribution. Later, it was gradually formed through a network joint operation agreement based on the principle of mutual benefit. Among the 3 major power grids in the United States, the Eastern Power Grid is the strongest, selling 7.3 billion kilowatt-hours of electricity across the United States. This is a huge company, and the 2 scapegoats who were slapped in the face by Pietro were instructed by one of the company's shareholders. It doesn't matter whether they got any special hints or had ulterior personal motives. Shane doesn't care what's going on, because in a zero-sum game, someone is always going to get hurt, and no other industry except the energy market can provide such stable profits, so the energy market is the only industry where action can be taken. His opponent had recklessly decided to adopt this fighting style, and of course he responded in kind. At this moment, he was standing in the night sky in the Lake District near Scranton. Initially, Scranton's development was based on coal mining, but with the development of heavy oil, natural gas and electric heating models, anthracite was forced out of the energy supply market and the population continued to decline. Today, in addition to the beautiful Eastern power grid, which has the most important ring in the region outside of the distribution network, there is little of note here. Shane came to this distribution point from New York City, 120 miles away. Several repairmen covered in oil were pacing blankly below him. The outdoor weather in late autumn was extremely cold, and the wages were not very high. Of course, their enthusiasm for service could not be called active. They did not finish this round until midnight. 07 don't even think about going out. In this way, Shane has enough time to deal a fatal blow to the already dilapidated power grid. Look at these big guys, they're about to take the blame for their master's madness. He stood alone 200 feet in the air, admiring the high-voltage transmission lines not far from his feet. He looked at the high-voltage transmission lines without any obstruction. The high-voltage current of 230,000 volts passed through these towers from the west to the west. It is transported eastward to New York and Philadelphia, providing light and heat to nearly 8,000 cities in these two major cities. Today, they will temporarily lose this convenience brought by modern technology, maybe for a few hours, maybe for a whole day, no one knows. It depends on the response speed of the network and whether the security measures they claim are true. So brilliant. A gust of wind blew by, and a line suddenly swayed and connected with another parallel line. Sparks flew and the world fell into darkness. The metropolis 2 hours' drive away is a bustling scene of lights and entertainment. Under the cover of night, the city blocks are neatly divided into light and dark parts. The east side is nestled against the Atlantic Ocean. It is surprisingly lively and crowded under the gentle night. In sharp contrast to the daytime, all the skyscrapers are shining without distracting from other scenery. The square below Rockefeller Center attracts people from all over the world like a chameleon. Various events are held here and DJs are already there. While calling people to come on stage, suddenly the whole world lost its light. Blackout? People have been waiting for this for a long time? The power of superpowers is not comparable to the power grids of the third world. Governments and individuals have been calling for it for a long time, but the lax grid operators have never been able to make major changes. They just don't know that this time how long to stand in the dark. Anxious people began to say swear words, and words starting with F and S blurted out. Under the weak illumination of electronic devices, the sidewalks and plants shone with faint reflections under the stars and moon, as if the world had just embarked on a journey. On the road to hell, more and more people can only see the shaking heads, but cannot clearly see their appearance. Look, there's light over there, across the wide Hudson River. The girl pointed to the opposite bank and shouted, where the office installed a new solar system, which now shines brightly in the darkness due to the sunlight collected during the day. Light. After a while, buildings that could use their own energy to power their own fires started to catch fire one after another, but nearby residents will never forget that at that moment, the whole world seemed to have fallen into darkness, but the mutant building still radiated light. What's going on? A senior manager of the power system hurried to the control room. There was indeed electricity here, but the sky outside the window had gradually darkened. He thought that tomorrow there would be a lot of abuse in the newspapers, and there would be more. There are those nasty hostile politicians who always want to show how much they care about the people by levying charges on the electricity system. The thought of being surrounded by reporters again tomorrow made him upset and his head ached. The power is being restored. The engineer did not dare to delay and replied in as concise language as possible. A power reversal occurred on the line between western New York and Pittsburgh. Although the power transmitted on the line was only 300 to 500 megawatts, the reversal occurred when the power instantly increased to 1,000 megawatts, which is equivalent to a large power plant. Transmission power. We expect the reverse current may be as high as 3,000 megawatts. This is a normal phenomenon in power incidents and we are working to eliminate this phenomenon as quickly as possible. To hell with your normal life, then check it out. Get the engineers in the helicopter. I want them to trace the line in Pennsylvania before they are allowed to return. The supervisor scoffed. Helicopter maintenance is of course very fast, but it is also very dangerous. You have to keep hovering over the wires to keep the crew sitting at the door of the aircraft still. If the aircraft touches the faulty wires during maintenance, then the aircraft and people on the plane may be electrocuted or even killed in the accident. Such rapid overhauls cost a lot of money. Often only under strong political pressure, the power grid at that time was unwilling to offer huge bounties to recruit death squads. However, the situation has changed recently. The new plan of manufacturing giant Stark Industries directly targets the power market. As the largest share of the Eastern power grid, it will obviously bear the brunt. At this moment, if nothing happens, it will be the greatest success, otherwise Stark's supporters will only be able to make jokes. You must know that change always starts from the smallest place, and the dam that has been stable for hundreds of years will often collapse in an unnoticeable ant nest. As an executive and shareholder, he should not see problems in his company at this time. At that moment, no one thought of Osborne. After all, this rooftop solar system was aimed at the small and medium-sized housing market, not the eastern metropolitan areas where demand was much greater, and no one knew it was the company's new owner who was causing the outage. Had just been freed from the arms business. An inspection team was dispatched, but bad news soon followed. Due to an accident in an important power system, the load on the entire power grid was extremely high. The power grid in the entire eastern part of the beautiful country was suddenly overloaded. Now the real accident finally showed its ugly face. Beginning with lines in New York, Detroit and Cleveland and ending in Toronto and Ottawa in Canada, more than 100 power plants across the United States and Canada, including 22 nuclear power plants, automatically shut down for protection in one of the worst blackouts in North American history. Then it happened. At the same time, in the triple crooked wing building at 38N 5333.78, north latitude and 775,338.91 east longitude, a one-eyed black man wearing an eye patch stood quietly in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, staring at the dim night scene outside the window. There had just been a power outage here, but luckily the SHIELD headquarters also had a power outage. As long as there was no invasion by foreign enemies, the one-eyed black man's stern face always maintained an unswerving, submissive calm, and the lights, elevators and defense systems were all working stably. That makes sense. Agent Coulson knocked on the door, walked in after getting permission, and handed several snapshots of faxed information to the black-clad Director 010. The initial cause was a short circuit in the power line. It may be that branches were blown up by the wind and hung on high voltage lines, causing power backflow. This is a common problem, but the power system in the entire region began to take automatic protection measures to cut off communication with the overloaded system. Such a widespread power outage was caused by the outage of more than 100 power plants, including 22 nuclear reactors. Experts concluded that this was an unexpected reaction caused by an accident rather than an external attack. So, it's not humanity's fault? The one-eyed black man asked, flipping through the newspaper. In principle, we can rule out the possibility of retaliation. Of course, you also know that the mutant's whereabouts are not easy to track, and he usually stays in Manhattan at this time. His entire office building has been renovated, and we even suspect that the poles have been replaced, which means we have no way of eavesdropping or possibly peeping, so the only option at the moment is to monitor via email and phone lines, but he doesn't seem to be the type to use electronic devices a lot. Coulson he tried his best, but his target wasn't entirely human either. Too bad he had a conflict with the Cyber Knights during the day, and there was a large-scale power outage at night. Do you think this is a coincidence? Blake shook his head and did not ask Coulson to answer. The last time I trusted someone I lost an eye, and since then I have learned to be wary. I hope this is just an accident because there is no way we can contain it, and if something like this happens again and again we will have to face a terrible enemy. This is what I don't want to see, but this is what I have to face. Who made us become SHIELD? The man in black murmured to himself, wiping the smooth glass of the car window. We are the last line of defense, and we will burn ourselves to defend the last line of defense that needs to be defended. Ads by Bid Gear Chapter 93 The Quarrel Between Two Girls. Ultralight hip-length tank top size 4 Lululemon HK 420 Hong Kong dollars. Is this thing on? From? When the end of the world comes, it's not an explosion, it's silence. The communication signal was interrupted, the lights kept flashing, the images on the screen were distorted, the children burst into sharp screams, the road fell into darkness, as if a huge black tide had swallowed the entire city, the buildings were covered by the night, only the stars glowed dimly in the sky. It was the largest blackout in the history of the United States, and few people knew that it all started with a small collision between the Eastern Power Grid and Osborne. It was not until the nightmarish 20-hour power outage ended that the trash cans clicked again, elevator doors opened, and underground trains rumbled. All these familiar sounds, power, water supply, and transportation gradually returned to normal in the vast area north of New York City. As a result of this crushing defeat, Stark gained the greatest advantage. ARC's engines generate electricity cheaply, and Stark Industries has had a small off-grid power supply system from the beginning, so they just have to wait for grid-connected customers to sign up. Osborne's performance in this regard is much inferior. This is inevitable. While the operating costs of a new solar system are next to zero, the initial investment is significant, and compared to the $50 per square foot cost of older energy collection systems, Osborne's new system is more powerful and slightly less expensive. There is a reduction, but for an average monthly income of $2,000, it is still worth considering. The company had no previous connections or relationships in the energy industry, making it difficult to attract important large customers. Still, the company made a handsome profit from the outage. Some wealthy locals generously placed orders, and others came from neighboring towns who never wanted to worry about a blackout again. Ji Guo Wangyang, although the profit of the new business is not high, at least the company's operations have almost no losses, and Shane does not have to invest too much. This was great news for the Academy, and even the ordinary people who were closest to them were rejoicing that the adventure had not failed. Now they are talking about it. With the environmental crisis and aging equipment, the problems faced by the three major power grids will only increase. Mary Jane sat at her employer's desk and quickly turned the mechanical pencil in her hand. I hope everyone can buy our products so that they can often live in the light. But this is only possible with government subsidies. Gwen Stacy had always cared about this place very much. Now she and Pete are classmates and come here every noon. Overall, Mary Jane and her, whether the relationship is good or not, she is used to this attitude, and she already knows everything here quite well. Not long ago, Shane donated some solar panels to the New York Police Department through the chief's father, so this time neither the local police garage nor Stacy's home were affected by the power outage. Now, she is arguing with Mary Jane about a new product. According to the social survey I did before, the popularity of new energy is not as optimistic as what the newspapers said. It also requires large subsidies from the government, otherwise many people will continue to wait and see. People are very dissatisfied with the power grid during power outages and say that they will be replaced as soon as possible. Replacement, but once the storm has passed, it will return to the old way of life. Look, this is the opinion of society's elite. Mary Jane quipped. You are fooling the people. They will always find problems to solve, especially when the power outages are getting more and more serious, and you know that winter is coming soon. Speaking of accidents becoming more and more frequent, she suddenly raised her tone and at the same time glanced cautiously at her employer who was standing next to her like a personal secretary. Shane's actions could not be hidden from her, and the gentleman had no intention of hiding it. Now she saw at her suggestive glance, Shane could only shrug and remain silent. He is not a destructive maniac, and certainly does not attack endlessly. Generally speaking, everything has a limit. This time, the other party broke the rules first. Even if it is just a shareholder, Shane has reason to take advantage of the opportunity to attack. But if he keeps going day after day for a small profit, even if he forces the other party to close down, he still has a reason to attack. It may not be in line with his long-term plans. No one wants to deal with someone who is too aggressive. The reason why the sun is the source of life is because of its warmth, not its cruelty. Shane does not want to be like Gerard, the amazing Lynn Norman, who even kills his allies for the sake of peace of mind. They have to confront him. Therefore, he just listened quietly without interrupting the conversation between the two girls. Gwen disagreed with Mary Jane, but her tone was gentle. I believe that more and more people will choose new solar power generation. It is indeed very good. My father's colleagues and my friends are planning to install it at home, but we must also see that its cost does require low to medium income people. Investors should consider it because they are the largest customer group. If they are unable to make a decision for the time being and have no urgent needs, they are likely to maintain their current status. Ads by Bid Gear Chapter 94. Don't be so careful. As soon as she finished speaking, there was a sound of footsteps, and the young President Osborn and his friend Spider-Man walked in. Spider-Man, whom he had not seen for a long time, had completely stepped out of his father's shadow, and his demeanor became full of vitality. His eyes were filled with the unique confidence and sharpness of young people. Well said. At the rare moment when his career began to stabilize, Harry finally had time to visit his girlfriend. However, as soon as he entered the door, he heard someone talking about his career, so his attention was immediately attracted to Gwen. The deployment of the rooftop solar supersystem is progressing smoothly, and the social evaluation is quite high, even higher than Stark Industries' civilian power engine, but the market response is relatively dull. In a country with frequent power outages, there are always people willing to spend a lot of money to buy peace-of-mind devices, but unfortunately, these devices are not yet mainstream. Now seeing a beautiful girl talking about a topic he cared about, Harry didn't bother to say hello to his friend and immediately listened intently. Mary Jane didn't say anything after seeing her boyfriend's behavior. She calmed down and listened to Gwen's point of view and confirmed it with Shaw N's words, so that she could better understand her and understand her more deeply. From a personal point of view, she does not hate Gwen. Different backgrounds give them different perspectives. Mary Jane, the girl next door, may have been a little confused before, but after getting a lot of room to grow with Shane, the female secretary is very different from her previous self. She is no longer as psychologically sensitive and fragile as before. For new things, unless they are indispensable, a hedge, revolutionary creations, there will usually be a long development process. It will grow under a general trend and develop more and more as the basic user base expands. It's coming faster and faster, and suddenly one day, the professionalism it has formed may be recognized by the market again and explode. This may be a positive change in user needs, or it may be an unexpected event that attracts more attention. But to start to achieve good results in the market, political support is needed. After Gwen finished speaking, she didn't notice Harry who was staring at her closely. She smiled shyly and added that this was her personal opinion. No, don't be so careful. Lee's eyes lit up and he praised the girl enthusiastically. I think your idea is good. In fact, we are also lobbying the White House, but it is ridiculous that the power grid pays more than us. The three major power grids would rather spend money on public relations than improve their aging equipment, but condemn our advanced products are really a group of short-sighted fools, and they are simply a stumbling block to social development. Harry's accusations are of course baseless, but making his opponents look like fools goes too far. Mary Jane shuddered and turned her gaze to Shane, who was slowly drinking tea across the room. She heard from employers who felt that grid modernization was an extremely expensive undertaking due to the nature of large-scale projects, with the costs far outweighing the returns, and that even the latest equipment would not last as long as previous equipment due to wear and tear issues. Scheduled maintenance and timely replacement are wise business practices. You must know that the larger the scale and the more complex the structure, the greater the possibility of problems. Instead of constantly upgrading and repairing, it is better to use the saved profits for new research and replace outdated parts with new designs. The same is true for smart grids. If it weren't for Stark and Osborn's epic making new technology, it might be the vein for the next stage of investment in grid facilities. By then, policy tilt will allow hundreds of billions of funds, related companies and individuals to share that feast. 2 new energy companies are trying to replace those dining at the table, or at least join them and share in the dining room. Compared with her employer, Harry's attitude is frivolous and aggressive, which Mary Jane doesn't like very much. She appreciates Shane's words more. You can despise other people's products, but you can't despise other people's wisdom. Gwen obviously felt the same way. She greeted Harry politely, then bowed and left under the pretense that her lunch break was over. Watching the cute figure disappear, Harry thought of his girlfriend. He had gone to visit her specially, but at this time the receptionist also returned to her busy work, so he could only stare at it with empty hands and angrily, "Owner." Shane smiled at him tenderly and sympathetically, as if he could see his inner embarrassment, which made Harry even more embarrassed. Fortunately, Peter, the school's nemesis, intervened in time. After having a cup of afternoon tea with Shane, the two of them were wrapped up tightly and went downstairs. The afternoon sun is warm and drowsy. Shane was bathing in the sunshine, thinking that since Osborn's problem had been solved from the beginning, he should move to Washington next. Ads by Bid Gear. Chapter 95 Forbidden Forest. After the meal, Shane and Blaze stood up and prepared to leave the hall. When leaving the Great Hall, Shane approached Malfoy, who was bragging. At this moment, Malfoy's bragging stopped suddenly. Malfoy was obviously a little nervous. After all, deducting 50 points from Slytherin can be said to be a fairly standard for pure blood duels. Excuse. If possible, Shane certainly didn't want to give up such a good opportunity for a duel, but the Malfoy family couldn't withstand another whipping from the Malfoy family. In order to prevent the Malfoy family from going crazy, Shane still compromised. He refused the opportunity and paused for a moment, crossed the Malfoy family and walked out of the hall. Recently, due to the upcoming exams, the seats in the library have become increasingly tight. Fortunately, Bryce's third-grade students helped them find seats every time, and Shane also gained Bryce's favor. There is little overlap between the classes in 3rd grade and 1st grade, so Bryce rarely spends time with his girlfriend during the day. They both have their own classes. Sitting in the library, Shane handed Blaze his notes from each subject and asked him to rewrite the notes and take them back for review. This guy has been in a relationship for most of the school year, not to mention whether he can pass the naked exam. Now he is sitting in the library reviewing. If it weren't for the help of notes and Shane, Blaze wouldn't know how to start reviewing. When it comes to the exam, so I can only take a crash course. Ah, Blaze muttered, putting the book aside with a doubtful expression on his face. What should I do, Shane? I think I'm going to fail. If you have time to complain, you can read the outline in the book twice. After listening to Shane's words, Blaze sat down for a while, then stood up and started reading again. During dinner that night, Bryce was immediately picked up by his girlfriend. Shane shook his head with a puzzled look on his face and returned to the auditorium for dinner with his book in his arms. While Shane was eating the pie, Malfoy's voice came from the other side with suppressed fear. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. They actually asked me to go to the confinement forest at 11 o'clock at night. Dumbledore is a crazy old man. Professor McGonagall is a lunatic. Filch is a lunatic. They are all crazy. They are all crazy. Got it. Draco, why not do something outside the Forbidden Forest? There is no need to enter the Forbidden Forest. As long as you are outside, there will be no danger. Yes, if it's just on the periphery, there will be many people sneaking in, and nothing will happen. Goyle and Laboon's comfort finally calmed Malfoy down a little. Shane listened to Malfoy's words and knew that today was the time for him to take action. He cannot enter the Forbidden Forest too early or too late. Too early, and he will easily encounter a nosy monster possessed by Quirrell, and Shane's very primitive illusion skills will not be able to hide it from the opponent. Too late, and the one-horned monster will not be able to hide it. The body of the beast can easily be taken away and buried by the rider, which is also a troublesome matter. Only by following Harry and the others, no matter how early or late, can they find a way to obtain unicorn blood and ensure their own safety, and it doesn't require too much, just one drop is enough. After dinner, Shane returned home, recovered a little strength, and lay in bed waiting for the opportunity. At 10:30, Shane took Culkin, put on sportswear and sneakers, and used illusion magic to sneak out of the lounge. When he came out of the dungeon, he saw Malfoy walking in front of them, following far behind. Shane watching Malfoy join Harry and others, they walked out of the castle under Filch's intimidation, walked to the edge of the Forbidden Forest, and walked towards Hagrid. Forbidden Forest? Do you really want to enter the Forbidden Forest? You are crazy. You are crazy. I heard that there are werewolves there. If we go in, we will be torn apart. Then you can only blame yourself, can't you? Filch looked at Malfoy with gloating. For such a pure-blood noble with magical abilities, Filch never had a good look. Why didn't you do it when you got into trouble? Do you think there are werewolves in the Forbidden Forest? I want to tell my dad. He is the principal of Hogwarts, and he will not let you take me to the Forbidden Forest. I will never go. At this time, Hagrid came over and happened to hear Malfoy's words. Hagrid didn't like the Malfoy family, so he directly rebuked Malfoy. it's useless even if Lucius comes. The headmaster of Hogwarts is Dumbledore, and Dumbledore has the final say. 0. Please give me flowers. If you want to continue studying at Hogwarts, you have to come with me. The situation is stronger than the person. Malfoy is not a complete fool. After calming down, he also knows that he will not face real danger. After entering the Forbidden Forest, he still needs Hagrid's protection. At this time, he cannot afford to offend the other party. Filch gloated and left the edge of the Forbidden Forest, and Hagrid took Harry and Malfoy to escort them into the Forbidden Forest. Shane followed them at a distance, trying to avoid their sight. Hagrid's Houndfang was very timid, but had a very keen sense of smell. If he got too close, there was no guarantee that he would not be discovered. 0.0. Shane opened the car door and sprayed odor-eliminating magic potion on his body to fight against the danger of being discovered. Going deep into the Forbidden Forest, Shane finally saw a silvery sheen on the ground in front of him. It was the blood of a unicorn, but unfortunately, it looked like it had been there for a long time. Shane needed the fresh blood from the unicorn's body. So he had to move on with Hagrid and the others. Soon, Hagrid and the others split into two groups. Later, Hagrid and the others even met a rider. Shane followed closely behind them and hugged them tightly. Then they changed teams again, and Harry and Malfoy were in the same team. Finally, as Malfoy shouted, Shane saw a dead unicorn in the distance, and the man double-face lying on the unicorn sucking blood. Quirrell the cloaked monster. Guy Luo saw Harry and obviously wanted to take the opportunity to attack Harry, but Harry was unable to fight back because of his scar, and Malfoy ran away with Fang. Just as Quirrell was about to touch Harry's body, a rider jumped out of the woods and scared Quirrell away. At this time, Shane stretched out his hand and let go of Culkin without saying a word. He just asked Culkin to walk forward in the grass to get the unicorn's blood. Otherwise, if Shane went by himself, he would inevitably be discovered by the cavalry. Only Culkin can act with caution. Ads by Bid Gear. Chapter 96 Burning the Forbidden Forest. Culkin's spirituality is extremely high. According to Shane, it is not weaker than most Warcraft. It is even considered one of the best among Warcraft. The most important point is that Culkin can understand Shane's words. The meaning of Shane's words, based on this alone, Shane knew that Culkin was definitely not an ordinary white snake. Stepping off Shane's body, Culkin held a thumb-sized glass bottle in his mouth. All he had to do was find a wound and draw out some of the unicorn's blood, and tonight's adventure would be completely worth it. The process offered no surprises. Shane watched the Ference rider hug Harry and leave, holding his breath, watching the Forbidden Forest gradually become quiet, until Culkin stood up and got into Shane's curled-up body. He breathed a sigh of relief. Finished. Putting the unicorn blood that Culkin had brought to 317 into his pocket, Shane stood up and was about to leave, but as soon as he turned around, the surging blood instantly turned cold. There was someone standing behind Shane. Who could the ghostly man in a black cloak be if he wasn't Quirrell, the two-faced monster? Damn it! How did I meet this guy? They were so careful, but somehow they were still discovered. The two-faced monster Quirrell was possessed by the Nameless Monster. Although he did not gain the power of the Nameless Monster, with the Nameless Monster's training in the dark, Quirrell more or less improved his magic level. Modern Shane faces such Quirrell. Even without the power of Voldemort, it is absolutely impossible to compete with Quirrell head-on. Fortunately, before entering the Forbidden Forest, Shane brought his pure white pocket watch to avoid this extreme situation. Of course, the pocket watch does not need to be used, otherwise, once the 7-day effect of the pure white ring magic is transformed into a fatal force, Shane's plan to steal Quirrell's head will have to be abandoned at the moment Harry defeats Quirrell. The thoughts in his mind changed quickly, and an expression of excitement and relaxation appeared on Shane's face. He looked at the direction where Quirrell was standing, and shouted in surprise, "Principal, Professor, you are here." Hearing this, Quirrell was extremely excited. Regardless of Voldemort's warnings and orders, he turned into black mist and rushed towards the Forbidden Forest without any hesitation. Seeing this scene, Shane didn't hesitate at all, immediately ran towards Hogwarts waving his wand, and very ungratefully started to set fire to a large area. Flame, flame, flame. The power of the magic flame is not comparable to that of ordinary flames. Soon, the entire surrounding forest is swallowed up by the flames. The flames spread extremely fast and tend to become more and more violent. At this time, under Voldemort's constant reprimands, Quirrell finally understood that he had been deceived, that Dumbledore had not come at all, and that he was just a snake in the teacup. During his days at Hogwarts, Quirrell's biggest fear was that his secret would be revealed by Dumbledore. At this time, Shane's words undoubtedly hit Quirrell's deepest fear, causing him to lose his mind and just want to. He immediately ran away from Dumbledore and fell into Shane's trap. As a result, he fell into Shane's trap. Idiots who were tricked by Hogwarts students. With Voldemort's fierce rebuke, Quirrell felt a pain coming from deep inside his heart. He immediately collapsed to the ground, his body twitched, and he let out an uncontrollable scream in his throat. "Sir, great master, please have mercy. I will chase him immediately. I must kill him, kill that hateful guy, and wash away my shame." "Stupid Quirrell, you extremely stupid boy. Although Voldemort kept scolding Quirrell viciously, now he could only count on Quirrell. He was tired of the rats or snakes that parasitized in the forest. At least he could still be a human being, so after the curse, Voldemort stopped punishing Quirrell. A hoarse voice whispered, "This guy is difficult to deal with. When he set fire to escape just now, Hogwarts soon professors from Tits and even Dumbledore would come here. You don't have to be afraid of the professors at Hogwarts, or even Dumbledore being with me, but by doing this I will lose the opportunity to master the Sorcerer's Stone. After I am resurrected, this thing will fall into my hands sooner or later. It won't be too late to wash away today's shame by then." Quote. Then, Master, should I leave the Forbidden Forest immediately? Leaving the Forbidden Forest and rushing into the Forbidden Forest to put out fires again as a professor is what you should do as a professor, isn't it? Yes, Master. Looking at the completely ignited fire, Kiluo immediately turned into a black mist and disappeared outside the Forbidden Forest. Late at night, the fire in the Forbidden Forest was quickly discovered without causing much damage. The professors at Hogwarts quickly used magic to put out the fire. For a wizard, it is not difficult to put out such a fire, even if it is for trees burned by fire. Magic and potions can also be used to speed up their recovery, and it won't take long for the Forbidden Forest to return to its original state. Standing in a forest scorched by fire, Dumbledore frowned. He already knew that someone was plotting to steal the Philosopher's Stone, and he also knew that Quirrell was highly suspicious, but he still didn't understand why Quirrell set a fire. If Quirrell didn't set the fire, then who set the fire and what was the purpose? Dumbledore, the shadow that Potter encountered before was. Before Snape finished speaking, Dumbledore had already realized what Snape wanted to say. He nodded slightly and whispered, "Maybe it's him. Isn't he dead?" Why? A look of shock appeared on Snape's face. Although Dumbledore once told him that the mysterious man might not be completely dead, Snape only felt that Dumbledore was simply too when you are old, you cannot make things up. As a result, it was only now that he heard from Potter, Professor McGonagall and others that when he encountered the black shadow of 0.7, the scar on his forehead was very painful and he lost the ability to resist. This made Snape immediately realize what was going on. Unfortunately, he hurried over to find Dumbledore to confirm that the pain on Harry's scar and his abnormal reaction had nothing to do with that mysterious figure, but the answer he got was completely opposite to what he thought. "Severus, it is undeniable that Tom is a very powerful wizard. No matter how powerful the magic lily casts, the possibility of completely killing a powerful wizard like Tom is very slim, so." Dumbledore Leto turned and looked at Snape and said. Those eyes that were originally kind and gentle became sharp and aggressive. He stared into Snape's eyes and said, "So, Severus, you are still willing to protect this child at all costs, the only child Lily gave birth to." Child. Ads by Bid Gear. Chapter 97 Rejection and Lessons. On the way back to Hogwarts, Shane deliberately turned to the side of the road to avoid the professors who were trying to put out the fire, and then used illusions to avoid Filch all the way to the Slytherin common room and back to his room. This time the action plan is good, but accidents still happen. Shane really didn't expect that after the collision with the rider, Quirrell's Two-Face seemed to have left, but in fact it was still hiding nearby to spy on him. His actions happened to be seen by the other party, leaving him exposed to danger. If it weren't for Strangelove and Voldemort were in awe of Dumbledore, and this time they might really have to ride on a pure white pocket watch to reverse a magical death in 7 days. As mentioned before, dispelling the effects of the death magic is a very important part of Shane's follow-up plan, which is closely related to whether he can steal Hero's head or even Voldemort's body. Next, all Shane needs to do is find a suitable opportunity to cast a spell on Tarquin. Thinking about it, Shane gradually fell asleep while lying on the bed. He didn't notice that there was still some silver-white liquid condensed at the corner of Culkin's mouth. Because Culkin kept spitting out the snake letters stuffed in his mouth, these silver-white liquids the liquid has completely disappeared. 07 Early the next morning, news of the fire in the Forbidden Forest spread throughout Hogwarts. In the magical world, disasters such as fires are not terrible as long as they are discovered in time. Everyone knows magic. You only need to use magic to create water flow or even ice. It is not necessary to deal with a fire that has not had time to spread completely. What a difficult thing, so this matter just became a temporary topic of conversation among a group of young wizards at Hogwarts, and did not cause any panic. After coming out of the library, Shane and Blaise were still talking about the exam, but as soon as they returned to the Slytherin common room, they saw Dorian waiting there. Bryce glanced at Dorian, said hello to Shane, and went back to the room to change clothes. Blaise left Dorian and looked at Shane and said, "Shane, sit down." All right. They found a seat in the corner of the lounge and sat down. Dorian wanted the elf to make them some black tea, but Shane stopped him. "Dorian, the tea is over, let's finish the business." Hearing this, Dorian suddenly realized that recruiting Shane seemed a bit beyond his control. Although there was an ominous premonition in his heart, Dorian didn't show any sign. He kept smiling and said to Shane, "Okay, Shane, you are a person who cherishes time very much. I won't delay it anymore. I just talked to you, should have thought about what you said, right? I want to know, Shane, what is your answer? Looking at Dorian, Shane did not speak, but replied calmly. I'm sorry, Dorian, I have my own plans. It's enough to cooperate with Andy at this stage. I don't plan to have anything to do with other people. But thank you for the invitation, it's a recognition of my ability, I'm really grateful. For a moment, Dorian's expression became a little unnatural, but he soon laughed and said to Shane, it doesn't matter, even if we don't work together, it doesn't matter. I still have some things to do, so I won't be here long. If you change your mind, you can come to me. Goodbye. Dorian was the first to get up and leave. Shane looked at Dorian's back, said nothing, got up and went back to his room. Shane had already seen Blaze standing there waiting. He opened the door and walked in with Blaze. Looking at Culkin, who was sleeping soundly in the bed, Shane suddenly hesitated. He felt that Culkin seemed to be getting bigger. It was a lot, but it didn't take long for Blaze to stop him. Shane also thought it might be an illusion, so he didn't pay much attention. Shane, what did you say to Dorian? I didn't say anything special. I just rejected him and didn't say anything else. Hearing this, Brace said with some concern. You are not wrong in rejecting him, but I think you should pay attention to one thing. During my investigation, I found that among the two people taken away by Dorian and the others, one there is a person who has a good relationship with Andy. He rejected Dorian's invitation. Later I heard that this person was taught a lesson and immediately changed his mind the next day and accepted Dorian's invitation, so I am a little worried about you. Blaze didn't finish his sentence, but Jen N understood what he meant. Bryce, don't worry, I will take care of it. Besides, I've been feeling a little uncomfortable recently. I can't wait to find someone to fight with. It's good to relax before the exam. Hearing Shane's words, Blaze immediately remembered the two pure blood duels he had experienced. After calming down for a while, he said, I forgot. I have been with you in the library recently, which made me forget about you. What did you become famous for in the first place? But even if it is so, you still have to be careful. These guys will not only find people in the first and second grades to cause trouble for you, but also in the fifth and sixth grades. These things can happen. After all, you've only been at Hogwarts for less than a year, so you'd better be careful. Don't worry, I understand. They chatted for a while and were about to go to the auditorium for dinner. Then Blaze was about to go out with his girlfriend, and Chanjan was about to go to the potions club. Before leaving, Shane looked at Culkin. Originally, he wanted to take Culkin to dinner as before, but Shane saw that Culkin was still sleeping in bed, which surprised him, but he still didn't think much about it. I was just going to find an opportunity to take Culkin to Professor Guy Turburn in the Defense of Magical Creatures class to learn about the situation. At the same time, in Dorian's room, Tarquin was looking at Dorian with an unwavering expression on his face. I have long said that a mute son like him doesn't need anyone to say anything. Just find an opportunity to teach him a lesson. That's what we said anyway, so why waste time? Listening to the sarcasm in Tarquin's words, Dorian subconsciously wanted to answer, but because of the cooperation between the two and Tarquin's strength and madness, Dorian nodded hesitantly and said, You are right. This thing has failed here, if you can do it, of course it is best. Yeah, that's right, it's just that the Dean has been watching me more closely recently. I already have two of them, so I can quickly teach that defeated general a lesson he deserves. Ads by Bid Gear. Chapter 98 Call Me Slytherin Fighter. Monin and Gideon, they are two Slytherin students under Tarkin. They are both third-year students. As the saying goes, they have similar odors. They also have a deep belief in purity, so they will naturally be attracted by the same pure belief. Attracted, and Tarkin's status was very high, plus they all had lawless characters, they all gathered under Tarkin's hands. They also know Shane, a rude and arrogant guy they've known since the first day of school. Just considering that Shane is more or less a member of the Belstead family, the two of them naturally criticize Shane, so they don't expect him to cause any trouble in the future. Now, considering the conflict of interest in Tarquin's orders, the two of them corner Shane in a very painful way, ready to teach him a lesson. This time, under Tarkin's instructions, Monin and Gideon did not block Shane at the door of the Potions Club, but chose to stand at the door of the common room, which was far away from Snape's office. They were also separated by the Potions classroom and the Potions storage room, so even if they fought, Snape wouldn't find them. When Shane came back from the Potion Club, he had a look of helplessness on his face. At this moment, at the end of the club, Lord Slytherin Orochi handed Shane another small piece of paper with a list of 8 books written on it as always. Although it looked smaller than the previous one, Shane clearly knew, each of these 8 books is as thick as the 2 books on the previous list. 3 of the 8 books are in the restricted area, so there is Snape's signature on the book list, authorizing Shane to enter the restricted area. Shane can't even find a reason to be lazy. The Serpent Lord's preference greatly influenced Shane's desire to transfer to Gryffindor. Of course, if he really dared to do this, Lord Snape would probably take out his wand, give him a big melon to chew on, and then eliminate him as a traitor to Slytherin. Shane held the book and looked up at the entrance to the Slytherin common room. He was about to say the password when he suddenly saw Monin and Gideon walking out of the dark corridor next to them. Although Shane didn't recognize them, he knew they were coming from the first moment he saw them. Are you Shane Belstead? Do you want to play with us? Shane's facial expression became a little weird. He took a step back and refused very simply. I'm sorry, I am a male representative with female hobbies. I really have no interest in dating you two. Find someone else. If you can't find one, I recommend Draco Malfoy. He is a freshman and might be happy to date you too. The faces of Monin and Gideon were slightly tense, but soon Monin stood up again and said to Shane, Shane Belstead, there are some things you can't escape. I know you can hear it. So either you come with us, or we take action right here and take you away. Shane looked at them, and at this time he also realized that these two people were most likely Dorian and Tarkin, but he understood deep down in his heart, and he still said, hey, you guys, if you want me so much, then I have no choice but to play with you too. He raised his hand and touched it, and the wand was in Shane's hand. Without any hesitation, he waved the wand continuously, drawing a dark green path. The thorns are thick. A thorny thorn vine grew rapidly on the ground, passing through the ground and walls, spreading toward Monin and Gideon. Seeing Shane take the initiative, Monin and Gideon immediately pulled out their wands and began to cast spells in Shane's direction. One used a petrification spell and the other used a disarming spell. Their movements are quite skillful, and they are definitely considered excellent among third-year students, but they are only excellent. A thorny vine appeared in front of Shane. It twisted and curled like a shield, resisting Monin and Gideon's spells. After Ma Nan saw it, he immediately wanted to cast a fire spell. But before he could finish the spell, Gideon stopped him. It's too narrow here to use fire spells, we might hurt ourselves. What should we do? Use the cutting spell a few more times and you'll be able to deal with those vines. After hearing Gideon's words, Monin was about to use the dissecting technique, but at this moment, the two of them suddenly saw a bright fire burst out in the dim corridor, and then the fire began to spread rapidly among the thorns and vines, and the people on the opposite side suddenly saw it. Shane actually lit the thorn vines he summoned. This guy is crazy, he will be burned to death. Monin and Gideon felt the raging fire in front of them and quickly retreated, not wanting to talk to Shane anymore. At this moment, a ball of flame burst out from the fire. If you look closely, you can see that inside the flame is a grapevine that has not yet been completely burned. It is obvious that Shane shot these grapevines, and the flames on the grapevine also followed, flew away. Is this just the first year? Stop talking so much, Shui Ru Wang. Gideon's wand released a stream of water that extinguished the flames on the approaching vines. When water and fire meet, a large amount of water vapor is immediately formed, blocking the view. This made it difficult for me to see clearly because the fire had blurred my vision. Subconsciously, Jidding felt a bad premonition, but it was too late. A figure that surpassed ordinary people's reaction and speed flew towards Jidding and Ma Nan from the ground. Before they could react, two hands came out of the air. Stretching out, one arm and one hand grabbed the ankles of Ma Nan and Jidding respectively, effectively pulling them upwards and hitting the wall and the ground twice in a row, instantly making drive. Jidding lose consciousness. Although Ma Nan did not lose consciousness immediately, a kind of pain, excruciating, filled his body, as if he was about to fall apart, and he had no power to resist. Shane casually threw Monin and Gideon to the ground, looked at Monin who was still conscious, punched him in the face, making Monin completely unconscious, and then waved his wand. The flames were completely extinguished and all possible traces on the ground were swept away. Not long after, Snape glanced at Monin and Gideon lying on the ground, and then at Shane who was using magic to clean the last stain on the corridor. He twitched the corners of his mouth cautiously. Get back to you. Go to the hiding place and leave it to me. Shane looked at Snape and decided to let him explain. Professor, it was the two of them who suddenly. Due to the failure of the magic experiment, they are all unconscious. If there is nothing else, go to sleep, otherwise I will deduct points from my own college because my students are disobedient at night. Ads by Bid Gear. Chapter 99 Curse. If you win the duel, one of the duelist's abilities is randomly chosen. Drawing in. Get. LV1 Cutting Spell. If you win the duel, one of the duelist's abilities is randomly chosen. Drawing in. After the mining is over, obtain. Dispel Magic LV1. The abilities extracted from Monin and Jidding are dissecting spells and disarming spells, both at level 1. It increases Shane's understanding and experience of the disarming spell, while the dissecting spell, which Shane has not yet learned, is a new spell that appeared out of thin air. So far, the two abilities that have been transformed into talents, Troll Power and Troll Spines, have been of great help to Shane, but Shane knows that these two abilities can only last until the third or fourth year at most, and by the fifth year, most people's dueling experience will reach a new level. It is unrealistic to win with these two talents, unless Shane can improve these two talents again. But even if these two talents cannot be further developed, it does not mean that they are useless. You must know that these two talents have a permanent charm on Shane. In other words, they will make Shane's body 247 attributes higher than most wizards. Just like Hagrid, when he fights with people, his physical strength is far better than that of most wizards. Ordinary wizards have no weak ability to continue fighting, and their own defense capabilities are also extremely amazing. Being hit by magic will only cause a slight pain and they can recover quickly. This is what magic resistance does. Although the magic resistance given to Shane by the troll's Thornskin talent is not as good as the magic resistance brought by the Hague giant bloodline, it can help Shane resist a certain degree of magic damage, which is enough. Many people know what happened tonight. Everyone thought I was in the common room. Everyone saw that I had just defeated Monin and Gideon. No one would have thought that I, a freshman, was beating 2 after becoming a third-year wizard. I still have the strength and energy to go outside the school to complete the curse. Thinking of this, Shane reached out and took out a box from the desk drawer, which contained hair and teeth soaked in potions and blood-diluting products, as well as unicorn blood also preserved in potions. Shane took some more materials needed for the curse ritual from another drawer. He did not take Culkin with him, but cast the disappointment curse alone, and then left the Slytherin lounge without anyone noticing. There is no way. What Quirrell did in the Forbidden Forest and the fire that Shane set in the Forbidden Forest made Hogwarts take strict precautions against the Forbidden Forest. If Shane goes in again, he will be easily discovered, so Shane has made the decision to leave Hogwarts again through the passage from the Willow Tree to the Shrieking Shack and find a deserted place to complete the curse. Leaving Hogwarts through the passage under the Weeping Willow Tree, Shane left the Shrieking Shack and quickly ran in the opposite direction to Hogsmeade, but he remembered that God-tier Abbot Forsyth was still in Hogsmeade, although he's not as good as Dumbledore, but Shane can't mess with him either. After running for a while, Shane finally found a small forest by the creek. After entering it and making sure that there were no large beasts here, Shane waved his wand to burn all the weeds and poisonous insects in the open space in front of him, then extinguished the flames and stepped inside. First there must be a sufficient altar. The wand was pointed at the ground in front of him. The soil and stones on the ground continued to rise, converging into a small slope. When Shane cast the spell again, the slope became flat again. Then, Shane took out various materials from his body and quickly used magic to arrange a curse altar. He looked at the small altar in front of him, which was engraved with spells ground into powder from various materials. It is covered with ancient magical texts, which Shane copied from Gavin's notes. For these ancient magical texts, Shane only knew them but didn't know why. He was like a scumbag who only knew 26 English letters. When these letters were combined into words, he didn't know any of them. According to the notes in the notes, Shane could only use the above materials to burn ancient magical texts on the altar. As for the rest, he knew nothing about them. After preparation, there is a real curse. As for the details of this curse, Shane Aheb was already familiar with it, so without any hesitation, he took out the 4 most important basic materials and first pulled out Tarkin's teeth. The wand made a clicking sound on the teeth. Following the direction of Shane's wand, the teeth slowly descended to the center of the altar. At the same time, 10 spells burst out from Chang'en's mouth. The teeth of the enemy have become cursed bones. The teeth made a clicking sound, and even gradually lengthened and deformed, turning into a small humanoid skeleton the size of a thumb, and twitched involuntarily. The blood of the enemy became damned flesh. The magic potion diluted with blood in the bottle suddenly boiled. As the boiling continued, the potion gradually changed from light red to the most primitive colorless. A drop of blood flowed out, and under the guidance of Shane's wand, it drew an arc, fell on the small humanoid skeleton on the altar. As soon as the blood touches the humanoid skeleton, it immediately grows a large amount of flesh and blood with the blood as the center, completely covering the small humanoid skeleton. At this time, the small humanoid skeleton was trembling more and more violently. It kept struggling, but it could not break free from the shackles of the altar. Shane looked at the little humanoid creature on the altar, vaguely feeling that there was an obvious evil aura growing on him, but he still continued to open the third vial as determinedly as an old dog, pointed with the wand again, and the hair inside immediately flew out of the soaked potion and flew towards the altar. The enemy's hair becomes a cover for a curse. As soon as Shane finished speaking, hair was sprinkled on the body of the tiny humanoid, giving the bloody humanoid 2 bodies, front and back. 7 black holes appeared on the spherical face representing the eyes, ears, mouth and nose, and there were holes on the limbs that looked like cocks. The palms and soles of the feet. At the same time as the little humanoid appeared, its body began to tremble, beating more and more violently, and a harsh scream came from its mouth and nose. The form of the enemy, the means of architecture. Demon blood forming spell. The 4th and final bottle was opened, and the silver unicorn blood, which was like mercury, flew out of the bottle and hovered in front of Shane. With the waving of the wand, it gradually transformed into an extremely complex rune. It is full of evil and mysterious atmosphere, which is contrary to the sanctity of blood itself, but perfectly blends together. At this time, a drop of cold sweat broke out on Shane's forehead, and a heartbreaking pain came from his head, as if an axe was hitting his head time and time again. Shane took a deep breath, held the wand tightly in his right hand, and directed the runes transformed from the unicorn's blood to slowly fall towards the human figure on the altar. With the humanoid monster's screams getting louder and louder, Shane successfully waved the rune onto him. In an instant, the human form and the runes merged together, turning into a small ball of flesh and blood. The ball of flesh and blood shrank rapidly, and finally turned into a flesh and blood seed with a silver halo, which landed on the altar. Together with the altars, the fragments collapsed to the ground together, burying themselves in the altar. Damn it, it's done. Ads by Bid Gear. Chapter 100 Death of Tarquin. The seeds of the curse fell into the ground and were buried deep under the soil together with the remains of the altar. They took root and sprouted at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, they turned into an ordinary-looking weed. While the seeds of the curse took root and sprouted, the surroundings flowers and grass gradually grew out of the soil, and everything returned to its original state. There was no sign that this place had been cursed. Of course, this is only normal at first glance. In fact, anyone with a little magic ability can feel the faint black magic atmosphere here. This is also recorded by Gavin. Shane has prepared a method to get rid of the black magic atmosphere. Magic potion. He took out the last 2 bottles of magic potion and poured some on the ground around him. Then Shane poured some more on himself to get rid of the smell of dark magic on his body. Then he used the disillusionment charm again and screamed at Hogsmeade. Hut ran. Slytherin common room. Tarun was lying on the bed, already asleep. He tossed and turned on the bed, sighing louder and louder. When he looked closer, Tarun had a layer of cold sweat on his body. Thick and thin beads of sweat covered his whole body. At this time, an evil and mysterious silver-white rune suddenly appeared on the heart of Tarquin's chest. Soon, the rune gradually shrank to the size of a thumb, like a seed that penetrated into Tarquin's flesh. Quietly it penetrated deep into his body silently. At this moment, Tarkin opened his eyes and saw that his eyes were watered with red blood, his lips were chapped, and a heavy cold sweat disappeared down Tarkin's cheeks. Damn, are you sick? When he lifted the quilt, Tarkin didn't notice that the sheets were soaked with sweat. He got out of bed, feeling the sticky sweat on his body, and walked to the room to freshen up, wash his face, and looked at himself in the mirror to see this. In one scene, Dajan almost marveled at himself in the mirror. He had thick dark circles under his eyes, a gray complexion, tight lips, and dry skin. He looked about the same as he did after a few slaps. This is. Get up in the morning and go to the school hospital. Tarkin wrinkled his nose and washed his face again. Feeling extremely tired, he returned to the room and lay down on the bed to continue sleeping regardless of the dampness of the quilt. Early the next morning, Tarkin opened his eyes and felt extremely refreshed, as if the patient yesterday was not him. After a little exercise, he felt Tarquin's excellent physical fitness. He immediately gave up the idea of going to the campus hospital and got dressed and left the lounge. Yesterday, Monin and Gideon were both defeated by Shane and it was said that Tarquin was quite surprised, so he was ready to take action himself. If this guy with poor grades still wants to be so ungrateful, Tarkin feels that he can take drastic measures. You must know that he does not need a Hogwarts diploma. He is the future heir of his family, and he does not need Hogwarts to find a job. With a diploma, it doesn't matter even if you are expelled. Tarkin was sitting in the hall eating with Dorian. Dorian glanced at Shane, grinned, then lowered his head and continued to drink his oatmeal. After breakfast, Tarquin was busy dealing with some things that seemed insignificant to him. It was not until almost noon that the sun slowly set, and Tarquin suddenly felt very tired. Tarquin didn't think much and went back to the room to take a rest, but when he lay on the bed again, he never got up. Dumbledore, Snape and Madame Pomfrey from the school hospital stood in front of Tarquin's bed. Madame Pomfrey examined Tarquin's injuries in detail, and finally shook her head helplessly and regretfully and said, Dumbledore Leto, it is very unfortunate that this child died of illness. He looks like an old man who has come to the end of his life. The appearance of his body does not seem to have changed at all, but his internal organs, especially his heart, have aged particularly badly. Because of this, I think this child must have died of heart failure, just like middle-aged or elderly people who live irregular lives. After listening to Madame Pomfrey's words, Dumbledore carefully examined Tarquin's body, and finally his eyes stopped at Tarquin's heart. Then he looked at Madame Pomfrey and said, Mrs. Pomfrey, Tarquin, are there any traces of magic on his body? Madame Pomfrey heard what Dumbledore said and immediately understood what he meant, so she replied, Dumbledore, I have worked at Hogwarts for a long time and have seen all kinds of injuries. I can't guarantee that there is absolutely no magical reason for them, but I certainly didn't find any traces of magic, at least within the scope of my ability. 0. Please give me flowers. I know your abilities and I trust your judgment. Madame Pomfrey nodded in agreement with Dumbledore's statement. She thought for a while before speaking again. Dumbledore, in the wizarding world, children die young from time to time, and it is usually due to problems with internal organs. Especially heart problems, which are more common in the Muggle world, so I think this child. She didn't finish her sentence, and both Blato and Snape understood what she meant. 0. Mrs. Pomfrey, thank you very much, let us take this poor child out first, otherwise it will not be appropriate to keep him here all the time. At the same time, we need to notify his parents, and leave the consequences to me. It's Dumbledore. Dumbledore and Madame Pomfrey carried Tarquin's body away, and Snape stayed in the common room to comfort the students, although he did not want to comfort the Slytherin students. All things have an end. Snape stood in Dumbledore's office. How does Mr. Severus Hunter behave on a regular basis? Hunter is Tarquin's surname. After hearing Dumbledore's words, Snape immediately said, Mr. Hunter is a pure blood. He often studies black magic in his spare time. If Mystique is still in school, he is probably a complete Death Eater. As far as I know, He also admires the occult very much and has secretly used evil spells on Muggle-born wizards from other colleges before. Quote. Severus, it seems, Mr. Hunter doesn't like you very much. Snape looked at Dumbledore, with some hesitation in his lifeless eyes, but it quickly disappeared without a trace, and said, I really don't like his pure-blooded Death Eaters, either. Looking at Snape, Dumbledore smiled and said, Okay, thank you, Severus, I will do the rest myself. Ads by Bid Gear. Chapter 101 Dumbledore's Problem. There are many curses recorded in Gavin's notes, but the most tedious one is the curse chosen by Shane. Not only does he have to obtain the target's teeth, hair and blood, but he also has to find fresh blood of a powerful enough monster. Such a tedious process and preparation, in exchange for the greatest degree of confidentiality. In other words, when Tarkin woke up in the middle of the night, it was his last chance to live, and if he had gone to Madame Pomfrey, the curse might have been discovered. However, even if it turns out that he was cursed, unless he can find the place where Shane placed the curse and destroy the cursed seed, he still cannot lift the curse on Tarkin. Even if he uses magic to save Tarkin, he could only spend the rest of his life in bed. When Shane finished reciting the spell and returned to the public, 560, lounge in his room, he realized that Tarkin would no longer be an obstacle to him. At that moment, Shane suddenly realized that he was truly suitable. Slytherin, not the other three houses. Shane stood in the corner of the lounge, staring blankly at Tarquin's body being taken away from him. His face, like the other stunned young wizards, was full of worry. Blaze stood next to Shane, looked at the expression on his face, and whispered, That's a good expression. I have 6 more years at Hogwarts, it's time to get a little regular. After a moment of silence, Blaze asked again, You have been busy most of the last month. Is this your job? Shane wasn't surprised. Blaze knew a lot about him, and he knew a lot about himself. What's more, Blaze looked like a peeing dog, but in fact he had a lot of things on his mind, he just didn't want to show it. Shane trusted Brace, so he nodded and said, With a little preparation, it seems like we should be able to succeed now. Bryce nodded slightly and said, That's it for now. Don't tell anyone about it in the future. I will pretend that what happened today never happened. Okay, thanks. I told you I didn't need to say thank you. They smiled at each other and fell into silence. Early the next morning, Tarquin's story spread throughout Hogwarts. At the same time, the news that Tarquin died of a sudden illness also spread. In the afternoon, people from the Hunter family came to collect Tarquin's body, and they were accompanied by a wizard hired by the Hunter family to investigate the cause of Tarquin's death. The result was naturally without any problems. After all, Dumbledore, Snape, and Madame Pomfrey could not find out the case, and it was difficult for other wizards to gain anything. This does not mean that Dumbledore surpassed them, but the curse itself is better than being hidden. You may not be able to find out what it is before you die. After death, there are more than 100 people who can't find out what it is. As a result, Shane gained a new understanding of the various magics recorded in Gavin's notes, and also a new understanding of his grandfather, who was able to write these notes and record so many powerful magics in his notes. Shane became extremely curious about his grandfather's experiences as a young man. You must know that this notebook only records various knowledge and speculations about magic, but does not record Gavin's life and experience when he was young. Obviously, this situation was intentional by Gavin when he wrote this notebook. Late in the afternoon, Shane closed the notes in his hand and prepared to rest. Judging from the recent actions of Harry and others, Shane thought they would soon pass through the living room door. Of course, according to Shane's understanding, Harry's actions were after the exam. In other words, before the exam, Shane could relax a little and there was no need to appear too nervous. Moreover, Shane also has some ideas about the exam. At least in some key subjects, Shane must perform very well. Closing his eyes, Shaw-En gradually fell into sleep. Just as Shane started to fall asleep, a figure appeared in Hogsmeade. Dumbledore walked through the streets of Hogsmeade and went straight to the Boar's Head Tavern. He looked at the Boar's Head bar, with complex expressions of guilt, regret, silence and expectation on his face. Dumbledore did not enter the Boar's Head. He just looked at the entrance of the Boar's Head and waved his hand gently. Something like golden sand appeared out of thin air and flowed through the open space in front of the main entrance of the Boar's Head. As the sand flowed, movie-like scenes gradually appeared in the sand. Under Dumbledore's control, these regressive effects, along with Dumbledore's slowly turning right hand, began to regress faster and faster until there was a scene where Tarkin was beaten. Dumbledore's right hand clenched into a fist, and the reverse image stopped with a bang. His right hand turned into a sword finger and waved slowly. The scene immediately started playing at the usual rhythm. Dumbledore continued to use his right hand to control the direction, advance and retreat of the scene. Finally, the drunkard that Shane transformed into after drinking the tonic appeared before leaving. Capture Tarkin's bloody teeth being knocked out. Certainly. Dumbledore muttered something and threw his right arm in front of him. The rolling sand immediately swept away in one direction. Wherever he passed, the swift footsteps of drunkards appeared on the sand from time to time, like a slide. Dumbledore cast his last glance at the Boar's Head Tavern. He happened to see a figure of similar height and build to Dumbledore in the window of the Boar's Head Tavern. Dumbledore smiled and nodded, without lingering, and followed the quicksand. Go forward. Dumbledore stared at the sand and saw the shadow in the sand took the potion again and turned into a student at Hogwarts. He saw the male lawyer turned into a boy. Just when Dumbledore wanted to continue tracking, the sand suddenly parted. Looking at the place where sands last stayed, Dumbledore murmured to himself with some regret, magic is not omnipotent after all. After all, after he took the tonic many times, his breathing changed and the tracking spell could no longer track him. It's fine if this person is not from the school, but if he is from the school, does he have anything to do with Chillo? If not, who is this person and why did he kill Mr. Hunter? Ads by Bid Gear. Chapter 102 Before the Exam. Shang Gao da Zheng Kai Ju Dian Rakuten Travel HK, 809 Hong Kong dollars Rakuten Travel, Ri Ben Xing Nei Ling Xian Wang Shang Lu Xing Shi. Dumbledore's investigation came to an abrupt end. The final touches on the little wizards are still in full swing. In the library, Shane was guiding Blaze in his review while gnawing at the textbook quickly, striving to pass the Potions Club exam before the end of the first year. Shane, there is an exam the day after tomorrow. What do you think I will do if I fail? Looking at Blaze with a confused look on his face, Shane said to him while flipping through the book. You have time to torture yourself, why not finish the second part of my Transfiguration notes first, and then come back and give it a try. Transfiguration exam, the main thing is practice. If you have mastered the practical subjects, more or less, you should be able to get an A pass instead of a fail. Bryce scratched his head in frustration, leaned back in his chair and continued to chew on Shane's notes. I have to say that Shane's notes saved Bryce a lot of time. Without Shane's notes, Bryce's current situation might be worse. In addition to experimental courses, there are only 7th grade compulsory courses for first grade students. Among them, the most suitable course for Shane is the Magic Potion course, followed by 07, the Transfiguration, Magic Spells, and Defense Against the Dark Arts. The 3rd gate course also performed very well even when Shane deliberately devoted his time and energy. Finally, the 3rd gate course is History of Magic, Herbal Medicine, and Astronomy. The courses, except for Herbal Medicine, are Magic Potion courses with learning and practicing, which are very effective. Shane can only pass the 2 courses of History of Magic and Astronomy, which are not much different from other outstanding young wizards. So, without taking the test, Shane already knew what he was going to do. After dinner in the auditorium, Shane and Blaze separated. Blaze hugged Shane, asked for his notes, and then went back to his room to study. Even he didn't dare to do it himself when there were only a few days left for the exam. Go see his girlfriend again, otherwise he will really fail the exam. Shane came to the Potions Club classroom with his books. At this moment, Jennifer Foley walked up to him and asked Shane in a low voice, Shane, have you partnered with anyone to sell potions recently? Strictly speaking, students at Hogwarts sell potions privately, which is indeed against school rules. However, Hogwarts has not strictly pursued this matter, but has given it a slightly lighter sentence. Of course, the premise is that the person selling the potion must be qualified, not someone who can show up. This is a problem, otherwise the punishment at Hogwarts will be very severe. Therefore, students at Hogwarts are not afraid of buying and selling potions. Looking at Jennifer, Shane nodded and said, by the way, I have been cooperating with others to sell some magic potions, what's wrong? Nothing special, I just want to ask if you are willing to cooperate with me. If the potion you provide meets the quality requirements, I can help you sell it in the Foley family store and only charge you a 10% commission. How about it? After listening to Jennifer's words, Shane raised his eyebrows slightly. The conditions she proposed were better than those proposed by Dorian himself. Selling things in the store, the price outside is commercial, but it is not a cheap price inside Hogwarts, as for 10% commission. Then less. This condition couldn't be better, but Shane wasn't going to agree. Not because of Oliver Fury, but because Shane has always been wary of Jennifer and felt that his nominal cousin was trying to appease him with something. Thank you very much, but now I am very satisfied with my vice captains. I have earned enough galleons. I don't want to change anyone anymore. After listening to Shane's words, Jennifer was not angry at all. Instead, she smiled and said, well, since you don't need it, I won't bother you. The teacher will come soon. As soon as Jennifer returned to her seat, Snape walked in wrapped in black robes and began to exchange potions. The communication was over. Shane sat back in his seat and breathed a long sigh of relief. After half a year of catching up, he could finally keep up with the speed of others' communication. In the past, in order to keep up with the progress, he didn't even dare to go home during the Christmas vacation. Instead, he stayed at Hogwarts to follow his progress, and Shane's parents complained for a while. Of course, keeping up with the times is just keeping up with the times. Shane spends most of his time listening to other people communicating and rarely communicating himself, so Shane still has some work to do. The potion club was over and the crowd dispersed. Shane was the last one to leave. He packed his things and waited for Snape to give him a new book list, but this time Snape did not give him a new book list. He said to Shane bluntly, the exam is coming soon, and the school year will be over after the exam. I will not give you a new book list during this period. If you still want to continue studying, then summarize what you have learned before and study again. Once again, you will gain something new. Professor, can you recommend 2 books to me, otherwise I'm afraid it will completely deteriorate after the vacation. Hearing this, Snape's expressionless face suddenly showed a sarcastic smile, and he opened his mouth and began to spit venom at Shane, saying, if you have the ability to avoid vacation, then you are not suitable for the Potions Club. Or Potions Club, just like those stupid Gryffindor students. In this case, there is no reason for you to stay in my Potions Club and occupy other positions. Shane had an awkward and impolite smile on his face. He wanted to make a joke, but it turned out that he was too kind. He wanted to make a joke with the Slytherin Snake 177 King, but he had nothing to do except wait for him to be poured cold water on him. Back in his room, Shane put down the book in his hand and looked at Culkin, who was sleeping soundly on the bed. At this time, he was a lot bigger than when he first started school. He didn't know that Hogwarts specializes in raising magical animals. Because of him or other reasons, when he arrived at the Magic Zoo, Shane inquired in the store that Kirkin had maintained the same body shape as when he first bought him for 2 or 3 years, but he started to lose weight as soon as he was brought to Hogwarts. After all, Hogwarts is no big deal. It's okay to be small, but I'm just afraid that if I grow too big, I won't be able to have enough to eat in the future. He reached out and touched Culkin's head, causing Culkin to retract his head into the snake-shaped formation, obviously not wanting to be disturbed in his sleep. Seeing this, Shane smiled and sat down at the desk to continue reading. The 2 days passed by in a blink of an eye, and soon the day of the exam came. The test consists of 2 parts, a written test and a practical test. For Shane, the written test is not difficult at all. As for the practical test, Shane is not afraid of any test as long as it is not a driving test. The first exam was magic. Shane and Blaise walked into the exam room together. Blaise prayed incoherently to Merlin to bless him with success in the exam, and the 3-day exam day began. Ads by Bid Gear. Chapter 103. During the examination. The written exams were always boring, with nothing surprising except for a Hufflepuff getting caught using an automatic quill. Among the written examinations of the core subjects of 7th Gate, the most difficult ones are magic potions and transfiguration, followed by magic spells and herbalism. The rest of the examinations are basically very simple. Although they are not as written, most of the answers can be found in I found it in the textbook. For someone like Shane who memorized the textbook by heart, it was really not a difficult task. Bryce is very capable in the exams in other subjects and is confident that he will pass. However, in the exams of magic potions and transfiguration, Bryce is really not confident. From the end of the written exam to the beginning of the practical exam, he kept sighing helplessly. Bryce, don't sigh. Part of the final grade is composed of the results of the practical exam. If you can get a high enough score in the practical exam, you can make up for the shortcomings of the written exam. Passing should not be a big problem. Hearing Shane's words, Blaise immediately cheered up and said confidently, if it is an operational test, I am not weak. I am really not good at the written test, but in actual operations, I am absolutely confident. Okay, let's start the exam now. The first subject is Professor Flitwick's magic spells. He is quite talkative. If the exam doesn't go well, just say something nice and retake the exam. Don't worry, I don't mind. Seeing Blaise's confident look, Shane said nothing and silently followed everyone to the magic research classroom to take the operational exam. The test involves making a pineapple tap dance on a table. You need the cooperation of several magicians to do this. If you cope with it on weekdays, it is very difficult to pass the exam. Generally speaking, as long as you can make the pineapple walk across the table, you will pass the exam. If you can make the pineapple jump, if you tap dance, you can get good grades. If pineapple can dance standard tap dance, you can get perfect scores. Among the first-year Slytherin wizards, except for Goyle and Laboon, who had a little difficulty dragging the pineapple from one side to the other with magic, most of them were able to achieve good results. Shane was the last Slytherin to take the exam. Before him was Bryce, whose grades were pretty good. According to Shane's estimation, he could probably get a grade of around E, which is better than A and pass. The passing line must be high. In Shane's past life, a passing line was equivalent to a good grade. Blaise walked out of the examination room and stood in front of the door at the back of the classroom waiting for N. Flitwick looked at Shane with a smile on his face. Although Shane was a student of Slytherin and worked hard on his own at the beginning of the school year, the qualities that Shane showed in the subsequent classes really impressed Professor Flitwick. Looking sideways, Professor Flitwick, the headmaster of Ravenclaw House who loves knowledge, likes Shane the most. He is so smart and talented, and he also has the desire and respect for knowledge. For the headmaster of Ravenclaw House, for the love of knowledge, Professor Flitwick likes Shane the most. He is smart, but also has the desire and respect for knowledge. Shane, let me see what dance you can make a pineapple do. Shane picked up his wand, bowed slightly towards Flitwick and said, as you wish, Professor. With a tap of the wand, the pineapple immediately seemed to come alive, spinning around the table, jumping from one side to the other like a real dancer, and then moving little by little to the other end of the table. And Shane is like a conductor of a band. The wand in his hand is like a stick, directing the pineapple to fly to the other side of the table and spinning around the pineapple several times at the end of the dance. When the dance ended, Professor Freeway immediately clapped his hands and said, "A very perfect tap dance, a very perfect, very standard magic trick. I think your results should be beyond doubt. Shane, you presented an outstanding O, a perfect O." Quote. After the transfiguration exam, only the potions exam was left. Shane and Bryce went to potions class together to prepare for the last and most difficult operation exam. Therefore, with a little work on transfiguration, you can more or less pass the exam. Standing in the transfiguration classroom, Bryce gradually turned the little mouse in front of him into a golden snuff box. Boo hoo 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 hoo. This is what you deserve. Professor McGonagall looked at Shane, but did not leave immediately. Instead, he thought for a while and whispered, "Shane, don't give up studying the transfiguration class after the holiday. You must keep up the water." After saying these words, Professor McGonagall left to check other people's test scores, especially Hermione's. Professor McGonagall wanted to take a good look. As the best student in the first year of Gryffindor, Professor McGonagall, I hope Hermione can reach O level as well. Shane looked at Professor McGonagall's leaving figure and suddenly understood what Professor McGonagall meant. Apparently, she wanted to invite Shane to join the Transfiguration Club, but Professor McGonagall obviously wanted to continue seeing him, so she said that Shane should do more Transfiguration classes during the holidays. Shane didn't look at their results, but immediately left the spell class with Bryce, because the Transfiguration and Potions exams were still coming, and Shane didn't want to stay here. Thank you, Professor Feyway. When Shane's transformation was completed, Professor McGonagall looked at Shane's successfully transformed snuff box, and a smile appeared on his serious face. Absolutely perfect work, all scores are beyond doubt. The Transfiguration test is to turn a mouse into a snuff box. This test is quite difficult. Like the written test, it is very difficult for first-year wizards to cope with the test. Therefore, Professor McGonagall's scoring standards are not high. As long as they can turn a mouse into a snuff box, the mouse turns into a snuff box roughly like this, even if there are tendrils or tails left on the snuff box, and there are hairs on the surface of the snuff box, it is considered a passing test. Professor McGonagall walked over and Shane just punched her. Of course, the difficulty of this exam also determines that its maximum score is 0 points. Many students who usually have good grades, such as students who also have good grades in the written exam, cannot get points in the practical exam. Thank you, Professor McGonagall. The mouse's body rotated violently, and in the blink of an eye it turned into a snuff box made of pure silver. The snuff box shone with a dazzling luster and had very delicate carvings on it. In the center of the snuff box is a fairly standard Hogwarts. See school emblem. Shane pouted slightly, then waved his wand and threw it at the mouse in front of him. Ads by Bid Gear. Chapter 104 Snape's Additional Trial. Water from the Wongyu River, mistletoe berries, valerian, and standard ingredients, you can get the Wongyu potion. Shane looked at the various materials on the table in front of him and immediately guessed the topic of the Magic Pharmacist Operation Test. At the same time, he guessed the content of the operation test from the materials. He also guessed the first difficulty of the Magic Pharmacist Operation Test. If the materials can, if it is used to determine which magic potion to brew, then half of the operation test is passed. Next, if the materials used on the stage are handled well, you can ensure that you pass the test. If you use the materials at a good speed, you can ensure that you pass the level. If you want to get a higher score, you need to talk about the quality of the finished magic potion. For Shane, a member of the Potions Club, this exam was not difficult, but when Shane was about to perform the operation, Snape suddenly walked up to him and said, "Shane, let me see the training results of your Potion Society. The standard time for the forgetting potion is 45 minutes. Now I need you to help me shorten the time to half an hour." The change of time meant Shane had to make 090 changes to the standard amnesia potion recipe. Hermione was not far from Shane at this time, so she naturally heard what Snape said to Shane and shortened the brewing time of the standard potion by 15 minutes. Hermione's first reaction was that Shane had made Snape angry and that he was deliberately making things difficult for Shane. But Hermione's first reaction was that Shane was Snape's favorite student. It didn't sound like Snape was angry at all. In other words, it is possible to shorten the time. Hermione stared at Shane, wanting to see if he could do it, but at this moment, Snape glanced at Hermione with disapproval and said coldly, "Ms. Granger, maybe I should remind you, everyone's exam time is only 1 hour. If you exceed the time limit, you can only get a failed grade." Failure is absolutely fatal and the most terrifying for Hermione. Although she was a little unwilling, when Hermione heard Snape's words, she immediately turned her head and looked at the crucible in front of her. Start brewing the potion according to the standard, forgetting potion, recipe. Finally, in order to make the stone potion, Shane's turpentine cannot be used. At this time, Shane no longer cared whether Hermione was looking at him. He had already devoted himself wholeheartedly to thinking about the standard formula for the amnesia potion. What Snape said to Hermione, he also said to Shane. The exam time is only 1 hour, which means that Shane only has half an hour at most to summarize the prescription optimization, and it may actually be shorter. Of course, Shane can also use the usual formula to prepare the forgetting potion, and Snape will not embarrass Shane by not giving him high scores, but in the Potions Club the next year, Shane may not be able to continue to prepare the potion. In fact, this is also one of the reasons why Snape's Potions Society is very small. At the end of every semester, he will hold a midterm exam to determine whether the members of the Potions Society are qualified. Changing the formula at this time is Snape's test for Shane. Shane stood in front of the cauldron, his thoughts spinning rapidly. His mind alternately flipped through the contents of all the potions books he had read, studied and read in the Potions Club. Blaze's worries, Hermione's questions, Malfoy's the Schadenfreude and Millicent's hidden malice did not affect Shane at all. He just stood in front of the crucible, thinking quietly. Snape looked at Shane reluctantly, his confidence in Shane not weakening as time went by. Snape was very aware of Shane's level in magic potions, so he knew that the question he gave Shane, which was considered a difficult question in the eyes of other people in the Magic Potion Club, would definitely not be a problem for Shane. As time passed, the young wizards who didn't know what was happening began to whisper about Shane's condition. Normally, Shane is the absolute number one in potions class. Such leadership makes them feel desperate. Now seeing Shane's appearance, although they don't know what happened, many people are happy to watch standing there. Shane, a first-year potions scout, fell from the altar. Unfortunately, there are many things in this world that are not dependent on human will. Just when they were boiling the magic potion and watching the excitement, Jen N, who had been meditating for nearly 20 minutes, suddenly appeared. Professor, can I ask for some supplementary materials? Upon hearing Shane's words, Snape's expression did not change at all, but he immediately responded to Shane's words. Yes, but not more than 3 pieces of materials. 3, that's enough. Go and pick it up yourself. Your time will be deducted during the trial. Yes, there is a door in the potions classroom that leads to the warehouse. Shane quickly ran outside, pushed open the warehouse door, and ran in. Ever since he became a member of the Potions Club, he had helped Snape get some materials from time to time, and the warehouse was very familiar to him. After finding the 2 materials he needed, Shane immediately returned to the classroom and started organizing the materials quickly. Borrow other materials as catalysts, combine lethe water and valerian, and then use the second material to make an extractor to extract active ingredients from mistletoe berries. Both of these processing ideas come from the chemistry of life in the past and are now used in magic pharmacy, but it brought strange consequences. Pour the 2 processed extracts into the crucible and boil them. At the 25th minute, the magic potion is ready to complete the production of the will potion. Snape saw that Shane had only prepared the potion at the 25th minute. He trembled slightly impatiently and gave Neville a passing grade. Then he walked towards Shane in 3 steps and picked up the bottle containing the potion. Bottle, smelled the contents, drew out a drop of the potion with his wand, and held it suspended before his eyes for closer inspection. Very accurate. Totally extraordinary, extremely high quality. 3 consecutive points made Malfoy and Millicent, who still wanted to watch the fun, show indignant expressions on their faces. Snape had no time to care about other people at this time. He just looked at and checked the potion in front of him carefully, and finally gave Shane the score for this exam. Excellent potions. I'm glad someone finally aced their potions exam at the end of this term. Ads by Bid Gear. Chapter 105 Golden Robe. Shane, go to my office and wait for me. After marking Shane, Snape asked him to go to the office and wait while he continued to check. Of course, he was already impatient compared to a few minutes ago. Shane and Blaze left the potions room. Blaze went back to the lounge first, and Shane went straight to Snape's office. Shane was already familiar with Snape's office. He opened the door and found a place to sit down. He picked up a book related to magic potions from the bookshelf. As soon as he looked at the first page, he found this book. The knowledge about magic potions in it seems to be quite profound, and it is very difficult for him to read this book with his current ability. This book is not suitable for you. With your current level of magic and pharmacology, you cannot fully understand the use of this book. Snape's emotionless voice suddenly sounded behind Shane, startling him. Shane stood up immediately and looked at Snape. He had been reading for almost half an hour, and Snape had also recovered from the test paper. Professor, I was a little bored, so I just found a book. Snape nodded and said nothing. He just glanced at the book that he had read for more than 10 pages and asked, did you realize this after you turned over more than 10 pages? Very good, but some parts are not very clear. What did you see? The main purpose is to study the possibility of eliminating the werewolf virus. I personally think that the above-mentioned direction of extracting the werewolf virus from the human body and then conducting research on it is quite feasible. If Shane regards the werewolf virus as a disease virus, then the direction of this book is actually to create a vaccine for the normal human world. Shane believes that the wizard who proposed this possibility has probably developed a method to treat normal human diseases. Medical method, and intends to develop an antidote that can be used to treat the werewolf virus based on this. It looks good. Then, let's get down to business. Snape walked forward, closed the book, put it on the bookshelf, then turned to Shane and said, Shane, when you brew the potion, where did you learn the 2 techniques you used? Professor, you also know that my parents do not possess magic, so I have lived in the world of ordinary people since I was a child and learned a lot of ordinary knowledge. Among the ordinary sciences, there is a subject called chemistry, which is also a medicine for ordinary people. One of the main methods, and the 2 techniques I did before, are the 2 techniques in chemistry. Of course, this is not a complete copy, but a borrowed theory from related exercises, combined with the brewing method of the potion. The ingredients of the forgotten potion just now are more suitable, but other potions may not be. Quote. I understand, and I will take it seriously. I will take it seriously and prepare the article before the holidays. It's a good habit to just ask when you don't understand. Besides, after a year of getting along with each other, Chong-en can be more restrained in front of Snape. If your hearing is okay, I think I should explain it right away. Even though he said that, Snape still explained to Shane. The Golden Crucible is one of the many projects created by the Wizengamot Ministry of Magic. One of the magic journals, it is the most authoritative journal in the field of magic potion in the magic world. The articles that can be published in the Golden Crucible are of a certain level. Authors who can also publish articles in the Golden Crucible will also receive a considerable level of fame and fortune. The same is true for authors who may publish articles in the Golden Crucible. After returning to the lounge, Shane took a deep breath and calmed down. Snape was not very interested in what Muggle chemistry was. He just nodded slightly and said to Shane, everyday homework is assigned in the form of a paper, so you should be familiar with paper writing. The exam is over. The course is suspended. During this period, I need you to write down in detail the changes you just made to the forgotten potion formula. When I check and find no problems, hand it to me in the form of a paper. When I check and find no problems, whenever there is a question, I will submit it to the Golden Fleece, a magical pharmacy journal founded by Wiznamo. If your paper can be published in the Golden Fleece, your future in the magic world will be great. The road will be smoother. According to Shane's memory, before preparing to steal the Philosopher's Stone, the two-faced monster Quirrell disguised himself as a letter from the Ministry of Magic and lured Dumbledore out of Hogwarts. At that time, Harry stepped forward to stop him. Quirrell, so as long as you pay attention to the time when Harry goes to find Dumbledore, you can know when Harry will take action, and by that time, Shane is ready to implement his plan. Is there such a thing in the wizarding world? What he just said almost equaled what Snape said in 3 days. Now that the matter had been cleared up, it was impossible to talk nonsense with Shane anymore, and he was immediately expelled. For example, the research on the werewolf virus you just saw, the most famous of which is Damocles, who has recently been researching a potion that can keep werewolves sane after transforming. During his research, every time when the research reaches a new stage, he will record the research results in a document and then send it to Golden Rune. Currently, he has published 14 papers. According to the records in the paper, Damocles probably. Even though he has not yet fully developed the magic potion, based on these papers, he has already gained a lot of investment and great fame. Quote. From Snape's explanation, Shane also realized that journals in the magical world are actually very similar to scientific journals in the ordinary world. But whether the magical world is imitating the ordinary world, or whether the ordinary world is borrowing from the magical world, Shane can't decide. And no, the paper really needs to be written, and while writing the paper, Shane must also pay attention to the situation on Harry's side. In the second half of this school year, Shane and Harry communicated less and less, and they often only had some communication in one class. Among them was the reason why Harry deliberately avoided suspicion with him when he was investigating the Sorcerer's Stone, and also the reason why Shane maybe it's because I'm too busy and don't have time to communicate in depth. When leaving Snape's office, Shane thought about magical journals like the Golden Robe, which Shane had never heard of before. This proved that the magical world was definitely bigger than Shane thought. There was more to this magical world than just Hogwarts is not just this part of the magical world of Eagle Country, but a broader world. Journal of Miraculous Pharmacology. Golden Crucible. Okay, if there's nothing else, you can go. Professor, what is the Golden Robe? 0. Please give me flowers. The potion in Shane's memory is called Wolf Potion. Ads by Bid Gear. Chapter 106 Crossing the Gate of Life. Sitting down at the long Slytherin table in the Great Hall, Shane sighed, picked up his knife and fork and started eating. After a day of writing homework that was less than a finger long, and using all the brain cells consumed by a potions class, Shane was already a little hungry. Blaze looked at Shane and shook his head helplessly, saying, I've seen the feeling of being more tired after an exam than before. I can't help it. The dean asked me to write this paper. Halfway through, Shane choked on something in his mouth. He hurriedly patted his chest a few times and drank another sip. He took a big sip of pumpkin juice before exhaling and continued. The paper the dean asked me to write is very important and has a heavy responsibility. If I want to complete it as soon as possible, I will have to spend a lot of time and work for a while to complete it. If this is the case, can the article that the dean asked you to write really be published in Golden Crucible? I'm not sure, but it must be possible to some extent. The look of awe on Blaze's face was partly awe of the journal, the golden crucible, and partly awe of Shane, a good brother. Seeing Blaze's expression, Shane grinned and said disgustedly, "Don't look at me like that, it's just a little disgusting, I'm still eating." This is The Golden Robe, a magazine with the highest level of magic and potion. It is a magazine that my mother subscribes to every month. My good brother can already publish articles in The Golden Robe. Shane shook his head and laughed, and said, "You can be normal. I'm not sure whether it will succeed. I may not be able to write, and others won't even be able to log in. Isn't it too early for you to complain now? I just think it's really going to surprise me that you're just a freshman like me and you've reached this level. I told you it was just a fluke." Bryce didn't say anything else, but the smile on his face made Shane feel a little sick, and it never disappeared. The confused Shane could have eaten the whole roast chicken, but now he only ate most of the chicken, and he couldn't get enough. After the belated lunch, Shane wanted to go for a walk and breathe some fresh air, but when he walked to a little garden outside Hogwarts, he happened to see Snape threatening Harry. Shane didn't know if his headmaster wanted to use threats to make Harry back off, so as to avoid him getting involved in Quirrell's double-faced story, or if he just wanted to use threats to satisfy his own bad taste and give Harry some air. Maybe a little bit of both. There is a real duality to the way Dean treats Harry. Although he has never had a good face, is cynical, and ruthless, he is willing to do anything for Harry's safety, even if it means his own life. Thinking of this, Shane couldn't help but sigh. No matter what, his Dean was really not good to him. No matter what, he didn't want to watch his Dean die in Nagini's mouth and suffer a lifetime of torture. Sin, let's let our Dean live peacefully. Shane watched the three Harrys leave the little garden with their heads lowered, heading back to Hogwarts Castle. He knew that if nothing else happened, they should go in to protect the Sorcerer's Stone tonight. "Professor, I have already written more than half of my paper. Maybe I can give it to you for review tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. Be careful, I don't want to see a job that is fast but full of errors." "No problem, don't worry." Snape unceremoniously dragged the rolled robes away. Shane glanced at Snape, who had left, walked around the street twice, relaxed a little, and then returned to the almost empty library to continue writing his paper. After dinner, Shane went back to his room, pretended to be a little tired, closed the door and pretended to sleep. After adding some snake food to the sleeping Culkin, Shane put on light clothes and soft-soled sneakers, tied the pouch containing 9 magic potions on his belt, then cast an illusion and left the lounge, walked towards the room where escort Luwei was sent on the 4th floor. Shane didn't meet anyone on the road. After dinner, most students like to chat and party in the common room, so there are very few people outside. As for ghosts and the like, they are not wandering in the corridors now. The only ones they are likely to encounter are Pi Peeves, but that guy rarely provokes Slytherin students every year because he has the blood of Barrow, the ghost blood of Slytherin, so Shane is not afraid of Peeves. Ghost, he is not afraid of Peeves. This is why Shane is not afraid of Peeves. Just in the corridor on the right side of the 4th floor, through the ajar door, Shane could clearly hear a variety of loud sounds coming from inside, similar to gasps and dull roars. Obviously, there was something behind the door. The three-headed dog and Wei are awake at the moment. Fortunately, I'm ready. Taking off the music box, Shane carefully pushed the open music box in through the door. When he heard heavy breathing and what seemed to be grunting coming from inside, Shane tightened his wand, opened the door, and looked at Lu Wei, who was sleeping soundly. He walked straight to the hatch, opened the hatch, and jumped in. As soon as his legs weakened, Shane found himself trapped in the devil's net. Before the devil's net could stretch out its vines to wrap around Shane, a ray of light erupted from Shane's wand, instantly causing the devil's net to retreat outwards, leaving Shane straight up. Take the lead. Shane used the levitation spell to slow down his fall. He used the light source on his wand to check the burnt vines of the devil's net scattered on the ground, as well as several 0.2 footprints of different sizes. He immediately knew that Harry and the others were here. In my hurry, I thought I had arrived early, but ended up being late. Hopefully it's not too late. Otherwise, even if the plan fails, it doesn't matter. It would be a pity to miss a good opportunity to make Voldemort turn a blind eye. Thinking of this, Shane quickly walked forward. Seeing the winged key inserted in the door and door lock, Shane waved his wand to block the other keys, reached out to open the door, walked in, and came to a large wizard chessboard. Yuan and saw Ron lie on your side. Before taking 2 steps, Shane saw Harry and Hermione, who were about to walk through the troll room and enter the potions room. Ads by Bid Gear. Chapter 107 Fireproofing Agent. Harry Hermione. As soon as Shane spoke, Harry and Hermione were stunned. When he approached Harry and Hermione, Shane covered his nose slightly. The smell here is really bad. The smell of troll corpses and the strong smell of blood. Any creature with a sense of smell will be kicked 10,000 points. Blood. Shane turned to look at the gargoyle, and suddenly realized that the gargoyle was not knocked unconscious by a punch. After taking a closer look, I found that the monster's head had been knocked off, and the head above the eyes had been torn open. The brain and flesh inside had turned into paste and spattered on the wall behind it. So cruel. Why do I remember that the original work was originally children's literature? Even the screen adaptation is rated PG. Is there anything like an afro in the original version? From the first time he came into contact with the magical world, Shane always felt that he was a little out of place. For example, his cheap grandfather scolded Shane when he didn't use his wand, and his uncle was expelled from Shane's house. Later, the notes about magic left by his grandfather also it's obviously beyond Shane's understanding of the world. Later, he went to school, and in the 3rd grade, of course Mori 07 was the best among the 3rd grade students in Slytherin, but at that age, he had already mastered the Iron Armor Curse, and according to the original work, many adult wizards were unable to master this spell. There were also 2 psychics who looked obviously quite elite, just like the real elite soldiers he had met in Diagon Alley before. By the way, there is also that white pocket watch, which was given to him by his cheap grandfather Gavin to attract hatred. Its effect is too powerful. Despite this, Shane still felt that he was a little out of place before, a little beyond his understanding of the world, but he didn't pay too much attention to it, thinking that it might just be a. Now, Shane saw the nocturnal dragon whose head exploded, and he finally realized that the world is more dangerous than he imagined, the magic is more powerful, weird, and sinister, and there are more people using powerful magic. All this was beyond Shane's imagination. On this level, if this was a movie, a PG-13 rating would be inappropriate, it was aiming for an R rating, dark and deep. Shane shook his head and continued thinking. Plan ahead. Harry, Hermione, what are you doing here? Harry, Hermione, what are you doing here? We are. Harry and Hermione looked at each other, not knowing where to start. Could it be that they wanted to crack Snape's conspiracy to protect the Sorcerer's Stone? However, they both knew very well that Snape was very good to Shane, and they were afraid of telling the truth. Shane wouldn't believe it. It's okay, I won't ask you what you want to do now. We're going to the deepest part of this place. Great. Shane nodded to Hermione and said, I'll go with you. Looking at Harry and Hermione's serious silence, Shane suddenly remembered that Harry and Hermione seemed to suspect that their dean was going to steal the Sorcerer's Stone, so it didn't seem strange that they were silent when they saw him. Thinking of this, Shane immediately pretended to be a little panicked. You two, stop wandering around. When I came here, I saw Professor Snape and Professor McGonagall patrolling outside for the night. If we continue to wander around, we will be arrested. If they find out we are here, it will be really troublesome. Snape. Harry and Hermione looked at each other, and both saw a strange feeling in each other's eyes. If Snape was there, who was the person who entered the library before them? Who tricked Hagrid into telling him how? Put Lowell to sleep? Who killed the unicorn and drank its blood? Who came here to steal the Philosopher's Stone? Harry and Hermione had no doubt that Shane would deceive them. Although Shane was from Slytherin, in their opinion, Shane was one of the few good people in Slytherin. They believed in Shane, but they had deliberately avoided it before. Shane, because they guessed that the person who stole the Philosopher's Stone was Snape. The 3 of them left the troll's room and walked through the short passage. Hermione briefly explained it to Shane, who said he understood. The 3 of them walked towards the potion room. As soon as they crossed the threshold, black flames lit up the room. From the front of the room, purple flames illuminated the back, blocking the entrance. Look, there are 7 bottles and a piece of parchment here. Hermione walked over quickly, took the parchment, looked at the contents on it, and continued. I wonder if this is a puzzle. 7 bottles, 3 of them are poison and 2 are wine. 710. One can help them pass through the black flames in front of us, and the other can help them pass through the purple flames. Give me a minute and I will determine which one we need. While talking, Shane took out a vial from the potion bag, which contained the fireproof potion in the vial. Finally, Shane picked up the smallest bottle. After being stunned for a moment, Hermione asked, Why do you say that? Don't we need to solve the puzzle to know what we need? How do you know it's fire retardant potion? No matter who this guy is, we have to stop him. Harry turned to Shane and said, Shane, let's go together. I'll explain to you on the way. All right. Did you learn magic pharmacology for nothing? Shane shook his head, pointed to the other bottles in turn and said, These 2 bottles are filled with wine, and these 3 bottles are filled with poison, but they are not real. The poison is a powerful sleeping pill, or a dose of water of life and death, and the remaining one is a sedative. None of these can help us pass through the fire. The only thing that can help us pass through the fire is the thing in my hand, the fireproof potion. Shane nodded with confusion and said, He is with Professor McGonagall, so no one should pretend to be him, right? If it's Professor Snape, who's in there? After saying these words, Hermione began to prepare for the riddle. But then Shane stepped forward and sniffed the contents of the bottle in turn. There is a fireproof potion here. If nothing else happens, this is the magic potion we need to take. Harry heard Hermione's words and turned to look at her, a look of concentration on his face. Because I brought some magic potions, including a fireproof potion. Of course, Shane's words didn't completely dispel their suspicions about Snape, but there wasn't much left. Shane, is that really Professor Snape? Snape. Chapter 108. You two should be careful. At this time, even Hermione, who had always been unconvinced, had to admit that she was indeed inferior to Shane only in potions. Harry took the vial, looked at the potion inside and the potion in Shane's hand, and said to Hermione, Hermione, Shane and I will go in and find a way to prevent the people inside from getting the Philosopher's Stone. You can go through again. Ziyan, let Professor McGonagall and Professor Dumbledore know what is happening here, especially Professor Dumbledore. Don't forget to write him a letter using Fukuro to tell him what is happening here. Quote. Hermione looked at the fire-resistant potions in the hands of Harry and Shane. These potions were only enough for 2 people. Both Shane and Harry were powerful, at least better than her, especially Shane. He had dueled in Slytherin. Hermione, then I realized that I couldn't replace them. Okay, I will get the news out as soon as possible, you two should be careful. Hermione took the vial of tranquilizer and drank the potion in one gulp. Without saying a word, she turned around and rushed into the purple flames of the front door, disappearing in front of Shane and Harry. At this time, Harry looked at Shane and said, Shane, let's go in. Yes. The two drank the fireproof potion and stepped straight into the black flames in front of them. Coming out of the black flames, Shane immediately regained his vision, but before he realized what happened, a green light flashed in front of his eyes, and then he heard Harry's scream full of anger and sadness, and soon Shane lost consciousness. Click here. Click here. Ding. Shane seemed to be awakened by an alarm clock from a deep sleep. He opened his eyes and restrained the urge to stand up from the ground in the next second. He carefully suppressed the intensity of his breathing and squinted his eyes to look at the surrounding situation. At this moment, Shane realized what had happened. At this moment, after he and Harry passed through the flames, the two-faced monster Quirrell, who had been waiting for them for a long time, directly used a fatal spell on himself and came here unexpectedly, and then revealed his conspiracy plan to Harry and the world. I don't know what happened to these Death Eaters. As soon as they saw someone approaching Harry, they would pounce on him and eat a big melon. Cedric was like that too, and so was he, and the noseless monster's monstrous possessiveness towards Harry must have rubbed off on his servants. Harry was led to the Mirror of Erised at this time. Voldemort was sitting on the back of Quirrell's head, begging Harry for the Sorcerer's Stone that had fallen into his pocket. At this time, Voldemort still had a different version of his nose. Obviously he was not in the best condition, and he was always staring at Harry, so he didn't even notice that the boy who was supposed to be killed by Quirrell's fatal blow did not die. Indeed, this is a pure white pocket watch. All that's left is to wait for the opportunity. Shane lay quietly on the ground, watching Quirrell ask Harry for the Philosopher's Stone, watching Quirrell put his arms around Harry's neck because Harry refused to cooperate, watching Quirrell because of the magic in Harry's body. Being parasitized by Voldemort, when his body touched Harry, the part he touched turned into ashes as if it had been burned by fire. Seeing Quirrell's right arm completely reduced to ashes, and watching Harry rush forward and punch Quirrell in the face, Shane realized that his chance to grab the head had come. Without any hesitation, Shane's talent and the power of the troll exploded completely. With a bang, Shane jumped up from the ground, stood between Quirrell and Harry at an extremely fast speed, reached out to grab Quirrell and fight back. With his left arm intact, he pinched his left hand hard, raised his fist, and smeared it on Quirrell's face mercilessly. With one blow, Quirrell's nose was blown away, his flesh and blood were blurred, and his facial features were blurred, because the old demon let out a shrill cry of pain from behind his head. A combination of summoning spells and werewolf magic. The troll Spinsby provided Shane with a decent defense. Thanks to this talent, Shane only screamed in pain, got up from the ground again, and threw himself at Voldemort. As Shane expected, Quirrell's throat was hit by Shane's palm and he almost shut his mouth. Thanks to Voldemort's support, Quirrell did not die immediately, but he could no longer speak quietly. Shane listened to Quirrell's unclear words, but had no idea of giving Quirrell a chance. This guy was parasitized by Voldemort. There was no guarantee that his body would not be controlled by Voldemort. You must know that Voldemort's power is not just talk, even if it is strange. Luo's hands were empty, and Voldemort had to be good at abilities like casting spells without a wand. Looking at Voldemort slowly catching up, Shane gritted his teeth, waved his wand, exploded a black smoke snake and shouted in the direction of the passage leading here, "Is Shenda's cross sword flying here?" However, with the help of these black smoke snakes, Voldemort easily escaped Shane's pursuit in the bursts of black smoke. Voldemort gave the order, and Shane felt a chill rising from the bottom of his heart, as if a lion majesty was staring at his face. It's you in Quidditch." As soon as he finished speaking, Voldemort on the back of Quirrell's head suddenly opened his mouth and released a large amount of black smoke. The black smoke quickly turned into a black snake. Under Voldemort's control, the black snake exploded and squirmed, returning to the doctor. Shane was so angry that he gritted his teeth and punched Voldemort, again. At this point, Shane clearly realized that his half-baked magic was definitely not as good as his fists. What kind of magic is this? Comparing magic with Voldemort, even if Shane has empty hands and no wand, he can't compete with him. It's better to hit him at close range. Your body is so strong, does it mean that you have the blood of magical creatures flowing in your body? Thinking of this, Shane pulled out his wand, cast the iron armor curse to resist him, and rushed towards Voldemort. At this time, Harry wanted to go over and help, but the black smoke snake threw him aside, and he could not get close at all. So Shane used a vicious palm in the next second and slashed at Quirrell's throat. It would be best if he could be stabbed to death at once. If not, his ability to speak would also be taken away. He loosened his fist and was about to land it on Quirrell's chest when suddenly an invisible force acted on Shane's body, lifting him up from the ground and slamming him against the wall behind him. Hero, let me control my body. Ads by Bid Gear. Chapter 109 Unprecedented Harvest. With a crash, a huge cross sword taller than Shane flew past the door, penetrated several snakes emitting black smoke, and landed in Shane's hand. Shane held the hilt of the huge cross sword with both hands and swung it angrily. The long and wide blade immediately chopped several black smoke snakes. Then Shane held the huge cross sword tightly and rushed towards Voldemort, resisting the black smoke. Smoke snakes attack. This huge cross sword was left by a knight of the huge wizard chess outside. When Shane passed by there, he accidentally saw this huge cross sword not far from the unconscious Ron, and then he went to look at it. Look, it turned out that he really used this huge weapon that ordinary people basically couldn't use. Although the troll's power is limited, he still controls this huge cross sword as easily as a stick. Shane waved this huge cross sword, blowing away all the black smoke snakes in front of him, and instantly rushed towards Voldemort's body. Choke it. The cross-shaped giant sword pierced the ground, leaving a deep sword mark. Voldemort controlled Quirrell's body and turned into a black shadow, passing by Shane and heading towards Harry. If he moved forward, he would not have much time. Don't talk about Dumbledore and the others. Even if McGonagall and the others came, the current Voldemort would not be able to defeat them, so he did not continue to play with Shane but decided to stop being beaten by the black smoke snake. Harry, who was knocked unconscious, took the Sorcerer's Stone from his hand. Turn them all into fossils. A gray light illuminated Voldemort. Since the fight with Voldemort just now, Shane has been wary of Voldemort not to steal the tower. Now seeing Voldemort circling around him, he used the petrification spell that had reached LV2 while rushing towards Voldemort, successfully keeping Voldemort in a stalemate for a moment. In combat, Shane uses fists and strength, and magic is sometimes used only for defense. Although the Iron Curse was considered a rather advanced spell, Shane's focus on hand-to-hand combat led Voldemort to take Shane's magical abilities lightly. Therefore, due to Shane's intentions, the extremely weak Voldemort was hit by Shane's petrification spell and was frozen for a moment, and it was this moment that gave Shane a chance. Shane held the huge cross sword with both hands and swung it angrily. At the moment Voldemort regained his mobility and tried to dodge, the cross sword swung violently and hit Voldemort as powerfully as a baseball, knocking Voldemort upside down. Going out, Iris's magic mirror was also knocked over and hit the wall behind her. Damn idiot, I'm going to kill you. You can't kill me, at least not now. Shane rushed towards Voldemort again, wrapped his arms around the huge cross sword, and inserted the sword into the wall with force. His body was about to fall towards Voldemort or Hero. The huge cross sword pierced Quirrell's body. Half of the sword's body sank into the wall, completely pinning Quirrell to the wall. Looking at Shane, who let go of the hilt of the sword and slowly retreated, Quirrell let out a shrill death wail in his throat. Soon with his final exhale, Quirrell's body completely gathered together and hung on the huge cross sword. The blood flowed down Quirrell's body to the ground, gradually forming a pool of blood. Ew. After exhaling, Shane took a half step back and sat down on the ground. Even with the power of the troll, the battle had exhausted all his strength, and now Shane's legs were trembling, and there was no extra strength left. Zip 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 zip. Streams of black smoke rose from Kilo's body and gradually turned into a human form, which was Voldemort in a state of remnant soul. Shane Belstead, I remember you, I will kill you. Shut up and get out. Before Voldemort could finish his harsh words, Shane raised his hand and cast a fire curse on Voldemort's remains. An orange-red fireball shot directly at Voldemort's body AHDG. Although it did not cause any harm to Voldemort, it was equivalent to a slap in the face of Voldemort's body, making him shut his mouth. The black smoke swirled and decomposed in the gaps in the wall, and soon disappeared without a trace. Looking at Voldemort, Shane realized that this time it was over, his head-stealing plan had succeeded, and it was time to see what he could do next. After sitting down, Shane opened the panel and saw the huge trophy he had created this time. Win the duel and gain 2 random abilities from the duelist. Drawing in. After the mining is over, you will get the LV2 soul stealing spell and the LV4 plant specimen making method. This is Quirrell. As for the 2 abilities he gained, it was within Shane's expectation. However, it was within Shane's expectation to tap the 2 abilities. Shane also didn't expect the second-level soul-stealing curse, but the soul-stealing curse, although the curse is one of the 3 unforgivable spells, its effects are still quite extensive. Just be careful when using it in the future to avoid being discovered. As for the method of making level 4 plant specimens, Shane didn't even dare to say anything. He didn't think Quirrell had any interest in this area. After spending so much effort and energy, he finally got 2 opportunities to extract it. In the end, he also drew some methods for making plant specimens. Shane just hopes that the next time he extracts Voldemort's remnant ability, he won't make any more jokes. Come to think of it, if Voldemort is so persistent, he won't have any fun playing with flowers and plants, right? Thinking of this, Jen N looked at the prompts for the ability to retrieve Voldemort's remnant soul. Win a duel and gain 2 random abilities from your dueling opponent. Drawing in. The lottery is over and you received LV5MAX Smoke Rope Technique, Split Spirit Body Immortality Technique. The master has not performed soul splitting, cannot obtain the method of soul clone immortality, cannot create soul weapons, and the solution is being checked. Filter. End the show based on the host's personality. Change retrieval capabilities based on host status. Get. Talent. Magic Awakening 2/7. Finally, Voldemort's remnant soul gave Shane 2 abilities, one of which was the Smoke Rope spell at level 5. This should be the magic used by Voldemort's remnant soul when he controlled Quirrell's body. The specific power should be greater than this level. It should be that Quirrell's body restricted Voldemort, who was already in the remnant state, preventing him from exerting his full capabilities. In addition, what Shane is most concerned about is the new talent, Magic Awakening, formed by the changes in the new Split Spirit Immortality Law. Literally understood, it should give oneself multiple magic awakenings. At this moment, Shane's mind suddenly went blank, and then he lost consciousness. Ads by Bid Gear. Chapter 110 Conversation with Dumbledore. When Shane woke up, he felt full of energy and relaxed. When he closed his eyes, he felt a strong magic in his body, which Shane had never felt until yesterday. Of course, Shane felt it very clearly. This was all because he experienced his second magic awakening yesterday, and his magic power almost doubled. It is worth noting that Shane's new talent, Magic Awakening, can not only increase the number of magic awakenings, but also increase the rate of Shane's magic growth as he grows. In other words, if Shane's increase in magic power was 10 units per year before, now he has almost 20 units of magic power per year, almost doubled. For Shane, this is the Magic Awakening talent. The biggest surprise brought to him. Click. The door to the ward was pushed open, and Snape walked in from the outside with the same steps, stood in front of Shane's bed, and turned on the jet. Shane Belstead, what are you thinking in that Gryffindor troll's head? I've already told you to stay away from the Savior, but you don't seem to take my words seriously at all and happily follow the great mix-up with the Savior, like a silly Weasley, and happily be his little follower. For the Savior's recklessness, arrogance and brainlessness, you will give everything you have, even embarrassing. Looking at the Slytherin Snake King who kept spitting venom at him, Shane clearly realized that not only did his dean not have any malice towards him, but he did it out of concern for him. After Snape finished spewing venomous words, Shane smiled and said to him, Professor, I'm sorry I didn't listen to you. I originally wanted to persuade Harry to leave, but then I heard Harry say that someone wanted to steal the Sorcerer's Stone, so I want to go with him to see what happened. I have a magic item left by my grandfather, which can protect me. The existence of pure white pocket watches, whether it was the commotion they caused in Millicent's place when school started, or the fact that he had escaped a fatal spell from Quirrell under Harry's watch before, made it uncomfortable for him to wear pure white pocket watches. No matter how secret it is, Shane doesn't have to hide anything for it. Sure enough, after hearing what Shane said, Snape frowned slightly and said, Shane, any magic item has an upper limit. Although you relied on magic items to avoid harm this time, it may not go so smoothly next time. Quote. Personally, I strongly agree with Severus. Shane and Snape turned to look at the door of the secret room at the same time, and saw Dumbledore walking in from the outside, holding a small handful of Babidi-flavored beans in his hand and chewing them loudly. Dumbledore sat on the stool beside the hospital bed, handed Shane a bean-flavored Pidgeotto, and recommended, Bean-flavored Pidgeotto, a very delicious candy, Harry gave it to me, can you try it? Shane has tried candies in the wizarding world, some he likes, and some he doesn't like much, such as the Babidi-flavored beans that Dumbledore handed over at this time. Shane doesn't like uncertainty very much that he doesn't understand, so he doesn't like things like Babidi-flavored beans that may find traps. But when Dumbledore handed over the appetizers, Shane decided to show his face to the headmaster. This is not an attack, just respect for the elderly. Pinch off a bean flavored with BB beans and stuff it into his mouth. Shane frowned slightly and took a bite of the bean. The fresh peach flavor instantly filled Shane's mouth. But unlike Shane, Dumbledore's face initially showed the look of anticipation became completely different. Well, it sounds like you taste good. Peach flavor. That's lucky. I won't be lucky. I just ate a smelly sock. It tastes really bad. Looking at Dumbledore and thinking of continuing to share BB's multi-flavored beans with Shane, Snape said slightly impatiently, Dumbledore, Shane needs to rest more. If you have anything to say, speak as soon as possible. Dumbledore was not amused by Snape's words. He just nodded, put the BB beans aside, and said with his standard soft and friendly smile, Shane, would you like to talk to us about last night? What happened? Of course Shane wouldn't hide what happened the night before, and he couldn't, so he told Dumbledore everything except summarizing the details of the battle. 0. Please give me flowers. As a master of capturing people's hearts, Dumbledore could sense whether the interlocutor was telling the truth to him without using magic. Shane was already prepared for this. Most of the passages were spoken smoothly, and the few passages that caused difficulties were only about his own abilities. Shane expressed part of the meaning in one sentence, and then Dumbledore didn't bother to ask any more questions. After Dumbledore finished asking, he nodded slowly and said, "Thank you very much for telling us the truth, Shane, you have done us a big favor." After listening to Dumbledore's words, Shane nodded, and then said knowingly, "Professor, the person I met last night, the person who painted his face on the back of Professor Shiloh's head, is really a mysterious person. If there are no accidents, then yes, it's him." Dumbledore's expression became more serious. He nodded and said to Shane seriously, "Having said that, Shane, I need to ask you something. I hope you can help keep it secret and don't let anyone know. Do you understand what I mean?" Shane looked at Dumbledore and suddenly understood what Dumbledore meant and said, "Not even my family." "Shane, you have to realize that secrecy is not about hiding and deceiving but about protecting them." Looking at Dumbledore with a serious face, Shane never thought about telling his parents or relatives of the Basked family, so after hearing Dumbledore's request, he nodded and replied, "Okay, I will confidential, Professor. Thank you for your understanding and help, Shane." Dumbledore smiled, sat up, and then continued, "There is one more thing I must remind you. The pure white pocket watch you are wearing is indeed a very good magic item, but it has a very big disadvantage that it is not concealed enough. Although I don't know when it entered the collection of the Basked family, in the magic world, among some old magicians or ancient families, the pure white pocket watch is a very famous magic item, so many magicians or families, everyone knows what to do with this magical item." Quote. Ads by Bid Gear.